welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend, because it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
And thank you as always, Jess. Hey, I need to ask everyone something right now. It's 2024. Do you know who your users are? That is the question we'll be answering during this Actual Tech Media EcoCast entitled Identity and Access Management Keys to Success in 2024. Talk about a timely and crucial topic. If you don't know who your users are and you don't know whether or not they have the right access, you could be in a world of trouble. Okay, now I want to start by saying a big thank you for joining us. On the EcoCast today, we have got some of the most innovative leading companies in the industry. It is truly a dream team lineup today, including Okta and Nudge, CyberArk, Rubrik, Keeper, Lacework, and Zilla Security. Wow. I mean, that is what I call a lineup. So we've got a full day ahead of us. Get yourself comfy, grab a beverage, and let's go. My identity, and I can verify it, is Keith Ward. Now, our other verified moderators are Jess, Scott Becker, and the newest member of the team, Mackenzie Putici. And as your moderator, one of my best jobs is to give away these great prizes. Today, we have got 3 $300 Amazon gift cards during the event, so you may get some help with those heavy credit card bills coming in from Christmas. And with that, everyone, it's time to really get this show on the road. We are kicking things off with a great overview of identity and access management by threat intelligence expert Melissa Palmer, who always has amazing insights. Melissa's ready to go, so I'm going to turn this over to her.
Thanks so much, Actual Tech Media team. Identity and access management, where I am, is a critical component of every organization's cybersecurity and operational strategy today. We have a great session today planned to help you get started with your keys to success in 2024. Right now, I want to take a couple minutes to kind of set the stage, talk a little bit more about what IAM is, and how it kind of quickly becomes a crucial part of any modern cybersecurity plan. Unfortunately, we have heard about way too many cyber incidents in the news lately, and let's face it, the threat actors have to get in somehow. And in many cases, this is with compromised credentials, which brings us to the importance of IAM. So let's start with IAM. It's a framework of policies and technologies, and it ensures that the right individuals in an organization have the right access to the right resources. It's primarily concerned with identifying, authenticating, and authorizing individuals or groups of people to have access to applications, systems, or networks by associating the rights with the users have and the restrictions with the identity that they're working with, right? So what are the key components here, right? Identification and authentication. We want to verify a user's identity using credentials like usernames and passwords, but then we also want to think of things like biometric data and multi-factor authentication. These have come increasingly important just in recent years because, again, these compromised credentials are freely available on the dark web, and when a threat actor buys a list, we better hope that we have something else in place as well, such as a multi-factor authentication. Of course, nothing is truly perfect. We've heard about cyber attacks where people spoof the MFA and get the user to just click OK because it's 3 a.m. and they keep on sending notifications to their cell phone, right? So that's why this is only kind of the first layer of what we need to worry about. Authorization, of course, is assigning and managing access rights and privileges to these resources based on roles, responsibilities, or group membership. And I just want to take a minute here and bring in kind of the principle of least privilege, right? We want to make sure that our users only have the right access to do their jobs and nothing more. If I'm a backup administrator, well, why should I be able to log into databases, right? So that's something that organizations should absolutely be aware with as well. And then user lifecycle management. This is so important because we have to handle the entire lifespan of the user's journey with an organization and with a system, from initial onboarding to final offboarding. I'll never forget, and this had to be well over a decade ago, there was a story that made, kind of the tech news of a VMware administrator that was super frustrated. They got fired and then they went to McDonald's, hopped on the free Wi-Fi and started just nuking the environment. Of course, they used their own credentials, so they still got caught. But, disgruntled employees are definitely a thing we need to be concerned about. And then, of course, audit and compliance reporting, right? We need to keep records of the user activities and access to ensure compliance with internal policies and external regulations. Also really important to have. Now, I want to bring in another really hot topic of 2024, because this is going to tie really strongly into IAM, and that is zero trust. Zero trust is a concept in the security world that's totally centered on the belief that organizations should not automatically trust anything inside or outside their perimeters, and they must verify anything and everything trying to connect to the systems, right? We don't want to allow access before we have absolutely verified that, right? We're not going to trust anything. And this is kind of developed as a response to threats can come from anywhere, and the kind of traditional security perimeters, we're no longer cutting it in the world, right? As we see with the kind of rise in ransomware attacks. So what are some of the key principles of zero trust? Never trust, always verify. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory, but it does go into a little bit more, right? No implicit trust is granted to access or user accounts based on their network location. So we want to make sure that no matter where a user is coming from, we're always making sure they are who they say they are, right? And we're not going to trust that because they can access AD, they can access VMware too. Least privilege access, I talk about this all the time, the principle of least privilege. We only want as much access as necessary for users to perform their job function. And this all kind of starts tying into, right, micro-segmentation, breaking up security perimeters into small zones to maintain separate access for separate parts of the network. Again, why should things be using the same networks for VLANs when they really don't have to? That's kind of like VLANs, I kind of feel like were the beginning of micro-segmentation all those years ago. And then we're always continuously monitoring and validating this, right? We want to check and revalidate the security status of our users and devices to ensure that they're meeting the standards, right? I'm not just going to log in to the vSphere environment once and have access for the next year, right? We don't want that to happen. We want things like timeouts and people to automatically get kicked out of a system if they're idle. Okay, so let's talk about how zero trust and IAM can kind of intersect, right? Identity verification. Zero trust models really need a really good, robust verification process, and IAM can ensure that the access to the resource is granted only after the identity has been verified. Dynamic access control. We want to make sure that things are dynamically working in our environment because things change so often. We want things to adjust based on context, behavior, and a risk assessment, aligning well with the zero trust principle of continuous verification and also tying back to monitoring, right? If we see a user doing something they don't usually do, we need to kind of flag that activity immediately. And overall, this kind of attributes and increases the security posture of an organization, right? We want to have everything being monitored and adapted to these threats and user behavior changes within real time. We don't necessarily want to wait. So let's say I'm a user, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. Maybe I'm a bad actor inside the organization. In a lot of cases, it's probably better just to stop me and then have me, if I'm a legitimate individual, call the help desk or go through the proper channels versus, oh, well, let her go do whatever she wants to. And then, of course, a big part about zero trust with the microsegmentation is minimizing the attack surface, right? We want to control and monitor access to resources and really reduce the number of entry points to attackers. And we want to align with the zero trust approach to do this. So what if we're making users authenticate and use the IAM system every time they move around the network? That's a really, really good thing. And hopefully with multi-factor authentication in place in various areas, if someone does get in somewhere, we can stop them because we're flagging this user behavior that is not the norm. So as we know, IAM is an essential component of zero trust. And while zero trust is a broader strategy encompassing various aspects of cybersecurity, You're going to hear a lot about it in 2024, right? And IAM really focuses on managing and securing those user identities and access rights. And it's really, really important pretty much for all organizations, no matter what security posture you're trying to adapt to or implement or make changes to. We have to remember that the security landscape is just always evolving, and so are the challenges and threats we're facing. The key takeaways from today's discussion are IAM and Zero Trust really go perfectly together. It's not just theory anymore, but practical, actionable strategies that we can put into place to make our environment more secure. IAM is really a strategic approach that really needs to align closely with all the business owners and stakeholders, right? People might not like that they have to log in multiple times. So there is a user experience consideration and user training that's needed to make people understand, hey, this is really important. We're not trying to be annoying making you log in all the time, but we just really want to keep you and the environment safe, right? We also want to make sure that we're streamlining this and working with our users for a really great implementation so everybody remains efficient and productive, yet secure. As we move forward into 2024, let's embrace the challenges as opportunities, right? This is all an opportunity for innovation and for us to become better technologists and secure our environment even more. Today, we're going to hear from a number of wonderful technology organizations with solutions designed to help you on your IAM journey. I am so excited for today's discussion, so let's get started. Back to you, Actual Tech Media team.
Well, I am really excited about this as well. Hey, Melissa, thank you so much for that fantastic overview of the topic. It is always great to have you on. So much experience you bring to this. So with that, let's throw up the first poll question of the day, although I sense it may not be the last. What is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? You see 4 different answers there. Are you starting new projects in 2024? Are they kicking off this year? Are you in the middle of something? Are you still kind of in the planning stages? The technology is changing so quickly. So let us know where you are right now. The majority of you that are responding are saying, hey, I'm not really sure when I'm going to be starting. And a bunch of you are getting started in the new year, start kicking off things within the next couple of quarters. That is good to see. These kind of things, this kind of information is important for us and for our sponsors. So thank you so much for voting, and keep doing that for another few seconds while we get this show further down the road here. And with that, it is now time to move along and get to the first presentation of the EcoCast. And this session comes from Okta. Presenting for Okta today is Cynthia Liu, Principal Product Marketing Manager for Devices and Security. That is one big title. Cynthia, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. I am going to turn this over to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on securing access from OS to apps with Okta Device Access. Today, we'll be going over the Okta Device Access solution, which is a fairly new area of innovation for Okta that we launched just this past summer. I'll be sharing details about what the vision is for device access and the capabilities that are available to you to start testing and deploying today. So my name is Cynthia Liu. I'm part of Okta's product marketing team, supporting Okta's overall portfolio as it relates to devices and device access. And since I'll be sharing information on roadmaps and visions, this session will contain forward-looking statements that include some plans that are currently under development for a near-term release and others that are being planned for a much longer-term horizon or are simply ideas. As always, we try our best to deliver on what we say in these webinars, but of course, no promises. All right, with that, let's get started. Well, as IT and security leaders, I'm sure you are all familiar with the need to equip your employees with success, regardless of where they are working, whether that's in the office, at home, or on the road. It falls on you to enable this connectivity while securing the organization's information across an ever-expanding range of operating systems and devices, including desktops, laptops, tablets, and smartphones, for as long as they are in service. With most employers still offering hybrid work arrangements, this means users and their devices can be located from anywhere. And devices that are not properly secured are points of enterprise vulnerability. So according to one industry report, about 60% of security incidents associated with a lost or stolen asset includes missing desktops and laptops. And this is more than any other type of device, including phones. Not only can devices be easily lost or stolen, but on top of that is poor employee behavior around passwords, which magnifies the security risk of devices. And many of us reuse passwords across work and personal boundaries, which means any device secured solely with a password is vulnerable. And unfortunately, most devices are so protected primarily with a password. And all of this compounded risk can lead to a greater potential at any organization for not only a security breach, but reputation and monetary damages. So devices are the front door to data and other resources, but it's often left unprotected, especially when it comes to securing access. If you look at cyber insurance as a barometer, a measure for threat landscape, premiums are increasing by double digits every year, which makes sense because the cost of a data breach is only increasing as well. Devices at risk really puts organizational resources at risk. And having strong desktop MFA and authentication protocols have become essential ingredients for qualifying for and getting lower premiums on cyber insurance. And customers have been coming to Okta for years with problems where they are unable to renew their insurance without some additional protections on the OS login touchpoint, or they are experiencing premium increases because they don't have additional security protections for their devices. Security standards set by industries and regional authorities are only becoming more stringent. You may have heard that the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS, which is the global security standard for the credit card industry. Well, earlier this year, they expanded their requirements. These include longer passwords with more frequent rotation, which you can imagine will only be more annoying to users and admins if their organizations continue to use passwords. Other requirements also expanded to include users, not just admins, that access cardholder data, and everyone needs to be challenged for MFA, and this includes enforcement at all types of workstations. So what this all comes down to is this. To secure remote or hybrid workforce members, it's essential to secure all corporate endpoints through strong identity-led security measures like MFA on the boot screen and the lock screen, and to enforce the security for online and offline access when Wi-Fi isn't available. So all in all, market forces are pushing organizations to address three key challenges. They need to secure access to all user touchpoints, starting with how they log into their devices. These security measures should be implemented with as little friction to employees as possible, and everything must scale in order to ensure high levels of security assurance across all operating systems and devices wherever they are located in the world. Security and identity security in particular must exist in all layers of a defense and depth strategy, and that means starting at the OS level to protect users and organizations. Which brings us to Okta Device Access. So Okta Device Access is a new offering that extends Okta's access management functionality typically applied to how we access applications, but now applied to the first vulnerable touch point of your workday. And that is when you log into your PC or Mac computer. This offering has the goal of unifying access management across devices and across applications, so really any access touch point, in order to help customers to minimize modern security risks and improve business efficiency. And it will enable customers to truly secure all access touch points, starting with device login. It supports your device deployment mixture of Mac and Windows machines so that you can have all your identity access management needs unified under a single platform for streamlined security and management. For organizations like NOV, Okta Device Access is something that just makes sense, and it addresses a gap in their Zero Trust implementation. Businesses are seeing a real need for what Okta can offer now and what is coming down the road to address requirements for cyber insurance, protect the devices of admins and other privileged users, and to secure on-premises and locally stored data on devices. But Okta Device Access has a long roadmap, and this year we released a few initial features that our customers have been asking for years, just to get the ball rolling. But those initial capabilities are a part of a much larger vision that we'll dig into later in this webinar. So what are those features? Well, currently Okta Device Access consists of two initial capabilities. The first is desktop MFA. Support for Windows is now generally available, while support for macOS is available for early access. And what Okta's native desktop MFA delivers is an MFA challenge on top of the user's account password during the device login process. The key benefit that customers will see is stronger authentication at device login. And because this is all done with a single unified identity platform, admins are able to enforce consistent security controls on both devices and applications and meet the various compliance requirements that require MFA in order to do business. The second capability that customers will have under device access is desktop password sync, starting initially with support for macOS. This feature is now generally available to customers. Okta has been able to work very closely with Apple to get this feature built on a native Apple extension and be first to market. And what this feature does is enable end users of macOS to sync their local password with their Okta password in order to log into their computer with their Okta password moving forward. Users will also be automatically enrolled in Okta Verify and FastPass if they aren't already. Okta Verify is our proprietary MFA application, which supports FastPass, our phishing-resistant passwordless authenticator. With FastPass, users will be able to securely and passwordlessly sign into all their applications after logging into their devices. So those are the highlights for these capabilities, but let's dig another level deeper, starting with desktop MFA for Windows. So this feature supports managed desktops and laptops, virtual machines, and servers that are Active Directory or Azure Active Directory joined accounts. Admins have a choice of factors to enable for their end users. This includes support for whether the user is online or offline when they log into their computer. For offline factors, users can use Okta Verify one-time password or YubiKey one-time password. And for online factors, users have Okta Verify push or one-time password. Admins will also be able to configure a policy that is targeted for certain users and groups. Policy options include things like number of logins without MFA to allow users to sign in and set up desktop MFA on their laptops. Additional policies include setting a limit on the number of logins using an offline factor, as well as setting the length of the grace period a user has after logging off or locking their computer without needing to be challenged for MFA again. Customers will also be able to use an existing device management or MDM solution to deploy and manage desktop MFA, and end users will be able to manage their own factors from their Okta Verify app. And in general, the key benefits that customers will see is just stronger security during the device login process and an intuitive native user interface that should help encourage end user adoption. So for desktop MFA support for Mac computers, this should sound very similar to the experience for Windows, and that's on purpose and by design. When end users are prompted for MFA at the login screen, they will see an authentication flow that looks native to macOS. Depending on what the admin has configured, users will have a choice of possession factors to meet their MFA challenge, and this includes Okta Verify push and Okta Verify one-time password for online access, and Okta Verify one-time password for when there is no internet connection. Support for other factors such as YubiKeys is also on the roadmap, so there'll be definitely a lot more to come. For desktop MFA for macOS, users will have the option to enroll in their offline factor in line from the login screen, and admins will be able to configure a policy through an MDM plist and target for certain users and groups where the policy options are similar to what I reviewed for Windows. And in general, the key benefit of Okta's desktop MFA is, again, the ability to enforce consistent security access controls at scale across a mix of devices, while providing users with a familiar sign-in process that can adapt to both online and offline scenarios. All right, moving along to desktop password sync. Currently, this feature only supports macOS Ventura and above, and we were able to develop it in partnership with Apple, as I mentioned. Apple has gotten really serious about securing Mac computers and is making it possible now for IDPs like Okta to build these features on their platform. As you might have heard last year, Apple announced a new framework or extension called Platform Single Sign-On. This extension enables identity providers to sync the macOS Ventura local password with the IDP password and to make it easier for for users to access their cloud resources. And that's exactly what this feature does. After end users enroll in Desktop Password Sync, their local account password is synchronized with their Okta password. This means the users will only need to remember their Okta password moving forward to access their devices and applications. And so while it would be ideal, of course, to get rid of passwords altogether, Mac computers do require the existence of a password. So it's great that that these sort of credentials can be aligned to a security policy of an IDP like Okta. And the key benefits that customers will see because of all this is just less password management for end users and admins. And since the password is now owned by Okta, admins can enforce a strong and consistent password policy for both their devices and their applications. And for end users specifically, the enrollment process is really straightforward, which I'll demonstrate soon in a demo video. During the process of syncing their passwords, they'll also be automatically enrolled into FastPass, which means secure and passwordless access to all their apps. FastPass minimizes end user friction while increases security standards with phishing-resistant authentication flows and adaptive policy checks for a stronger zero trust posture. And in the end, organizations can simplify credential management and also support a better and more secure application access experience for their end users. As is the case for all Okta products, Okta Device Access features the best of what the Okta brand has to offer. Both Desktop MFA and Desktop Password Sync are intuitive to use and easy to deploy, so customers can see value right away. With support for both Windows and macOS, we are able to support organizations with a mixed OS deployment, continuing in the tradition of our position as a neutral platform agnostic vendor. And because we are a unified identity platform, customers get much more than just MFA or SSO. They can access market-leading identity and access management capabilities that are centrally and securely enforced for a scale that works for your organization. All right, before we move on to discussing the roadmap, let's now see all these capabilities in action together in a demo video. And in this video, I want you to imagine that an IT admin has configured Desktop MFA and Desktop Password Sync in their device management solution. And these features have been deployed to this end user so that they can enroll in those features. This means the next time the end user opens and tries to log into their Mac computer, they will be prompted to set up Okta Device Access. So let's see what happens next. And I'll play this video now. Okay, so first, the end user will see a screen that will kick off the enrollment process for Desktop MFA. They are first asked to sign into Okta. And then to verify their identity, they will use Okta Verify push to do so. So on their phone, they will see that push notification, which after being addressed, will fully authenticate the end user. Next, the user is asked to set up their device access code, which is the offline one-time password factor that can be used to meet an MFA challenge at device login when there is no internet connection. And to do this, the user needs to scan the provided QR code using their mobile device. And to complete the account registration, they are asked to provide the one-time code generated by Okta Verify. And that's really it. The user set up Desktop MFA and they will be logged into their laptop. But next, the user is prompted to kick off the flow to sync their local account password with their Okta password. And the flow starts by asking the user to authenticate with Okta again using Okta Verify push. And in the background of this registration process for Desktop Password Sync, the end user is actually automatically enrolled in FastPass if they aren't already. In this case, the user has not, and they are asked to enable Touch ID to be used alongside FastPass for multi-factor authentication. The user is then asked to provide their Mac account password one last time, after which they won't need to remember this password again. And to complete the enrollment process, the user provides their Okta password as the last step of this synchronization flow. All right, and that should be it. The user has enrolled in Desktop Password Sync and in FastPass. Now, let's see Desktop MFA and Password Sync in action by first logging out. And what we will show next is the end user's new daily login experience. So when the user tries to log back in, they are asked for their password, which now is their Okta password. They are then prompted for a factor. And since Okta Verify Push was the last used factor, the UI defaults to that, but you can always go back and see all available factors depending on whether you are online or offline. But we'll go with Okta Verify Push again. And once the MFA challenge is successful, the end user will be logged back into their computer. So because the user's already enrolled in FastPass, they won't need to provide additional credentials to access their applications. And alongside the use of Touch ID, the end user can now access all the resources, including the Okta dashboard, knowing that FastPass is facilitating phishing-resistant authentication flows in the background. All right. So I hope that gave you an idea of what Okta Device Access has to offer today. But I'm here to say that there's definitely a lot more to come on the horizon. Building on top of the capabilities that we just reviewed, we have plans to enhance the flexibility and security of the device login experience. And this includes eliminating the usage of passwords altogether. For organizations that are ready to start eliminating passwords where possible, they will soon be able to enable passwordless desktop login. And securing that experience will be more advanced authenticator options, such as FIDO2 compliant YubiKeys and more to come on the horizon. And further down the roadmap, we plan to introduce a feature that we are currently calling Device SSO. This feature would enable a user experience where after successfully logging into their accounts, a single active session is established and extends downstream to all resources so that the user has access to all their apps and services without needing to sign in again after that initial sign into their laptop. And they would only be prompted to re-authenticate if the security posture of the device changes or if the policy of an application specifically requires additional authentication. And this experience will be cryptographically secured with access tokens that are granted by Okta and bound to the device and the user. And this will help to mitigate the risk of session hijacking. So with those near-term roadmap items, let's put them all together now to explain what we envision for Okta Device Access in the long run. And just to be clear, this is what we imagine the end-to-end experience with device access could look like. And while it's not the reality of today or even next year, this is a North Star we are ideating towards and what we see as development opportunities. So what does that include? Well, in this vision, we imagine we have an Okta customer in the form of the fictitious company called Evership. In this world, Evership can work directly with Okta's ecosystem of technology partners, which includes OEMs or manufacturers of laptops to purchase corporate devices in bulk. This OEM partner will then take that order and configure each device to be what we call Okta joined. What this means is that Okta Verify is pre-installed on each laptop. Each laptop is connected to the Okta customer's MDM solution of choice, and it is also preloaded with Evership's corporate branding, which means that when a new hire joins the Evership organization, they will be shipped one of these laptops pre-configured by the OEM. So when the new employee boots up their computer for the first time, which can be a PC, a Mac laptop, or some other operating system, they will go through an out-of-the-box experience for the setup. And the employee will be greeted with a branded login screen on their managed laptop. And as part of this setup process, the employee will be prompted to activate their account. The IT admins at Evership would have a range of options on how to enable new hires for account activation by either sending them a pre-enrolled security key that was shipped to the employee prior to their start day, or IT could have chosen to provide the new hire with an activation code, or the employee can verify their identity by scanning a government-issued picture ID in order to activate their account. Whichever way, the employee will be equipped to activate their OS profile and continue their setup journey. So next, the employee will be pushed to enroll in their authenticators. They'll be encouraged to download and establish an OctaVerify account on their mobile device. And as part of this process, the employee will also be encouraged to set up offline factors, whether that's a one-time passcode or a security key or something else. With both online and offline factors established, the employee will be better positioned to log in next time with or without a Wi-Fi connection. So now that the new hire is officially logged into their device, they may notice that OctaVerify is already installed and running in the background. Because when they try to open up an application like Slack, for example, they are not prompted again to verify their identity. They are already signed in. And the same goes for when they open up a Word document or navigate to the Okta dashboard. The employee has access to all the resources without needing to provide a password or some other credential because their identity was already verified at device login. But say they try to open up a business critical app with sensitive information, such as Salesforce. Well, in this case, the risk level changes and the authentication flow triggers FastPass for the user to re-authenticate before gaining access. To meet this step of authentication, the employee provides a fingerprint scan alongside FastPass to meet a higher level of security assurance. And with this seamless experience, the employee is now signed into Salesforce. So with time, the new hire is no longer a new hire and their daily login experience becomes routine. So what might this look like? Well, at the beginning of each workday, they will be prompted to meet an MFA challenge during device login. They will have a number of factors to choose from, but this menu would typically default to the last used factor. And if that last used factor is OctaVerify push, they can satisfy the MFA challenge by addressing the push notification and verifying their identity with Face ID on their phone. And with that passwordless experience, they are logged in for another productive day at work. But what happens if one day they lose their phone or a security key? Thankfully, there will be recovery flows to ensure that they can verify their identity, get help, and log back into their laptop. And the recovery flow that we imagine would include pre-configured information for the end user on how they can reach out to the help desk. The employee will be asked by the help desk to verify their identity by scanning their government-issued ID. And then with the employee's identity established, the IT admin will then share a time-limited recovery code with the employee, which the employee will then take and enter on their laptop to complete the recovery experience. And with that, they are logged back in. So as you can see, we imagine a world where Okta Device Access provides an end-to-end secure access management layer from devices to applications and at every user touch point throughout the workday. This is truly identity-led security that we look forward to working with all of you to get feedback and to prioritize the pieces of this vision that are most impactful for your organization. So finally, for my last bit of material, I want to leave you with a solution brief of what Okta Device Access can offer you today. Please also take a look at the Okta Device Access community and consider joining. We will be posting product updates and announcements there, and Okta experts will be monitoring the group to answer any questions you might have about using and deploying device access. Otherwise, if you want to discuss how Okta Device Access can fit into your technology stack, just please reach out to the Okta team after the session. I want to take the time now to thank you all for joining us today. And if you have any questions, please ask them over the Q&A widget on your screen. And with that, thanks again for taking part in this webinar.
What a great presentation, Cynthia. Thanks so much for that look into how Okta is securing access just across the whole stack. And now we've got another poll question for you. We do appreciate your feedback, as always, on additional resources you would like to see from Okta. They are ready to help you out, so let them know what you want from them next. Now, it looks like we had a lot of questions that we can't get to right now, but the Okta team will be following up and responding to all of your questions, so have no fear on that. I also want to remind everyone about the handouts. We've got a PDF from Okta on their device access solution. Be sure to check that out if you'd like more detail. As a reminder, the handouts section is right next to that questions tab in your control panel. So thanks to everyone who is answering the poll question, and we are going to now get to the next bit, which is the inaugural prize drawing of this EcoCast. As I mentioned at the top, we're giving away three $300 Amazon gift cards, and the first winner has been chosen, and that winner is, drum roll please in your head, Shannon Kennedy from Texas. Congratulations to you, Shannon. We will be in touch very soon about claiming your prize. And with that, let's keep moving along and getting to our next session. This is for Nudge. Nudge is on deck right now, and batting cleanup for Nudge is Danielle Russell, Head of Product Marketing. It is great to have you here, Danielle. Now, I'm going to be joining Danielle for some Q&A after the presentation, so keep those questions coming in. And Danielle, you can take it away now.
Thanks, Keith, and thanks everyone for joining today. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to show you how Nudge Security addresses one of the most challenging aspects of modern identity and access management, and that is all of the SaaS applications that your employees are signing up for, including all those random AI tools that they might be experimenting with. Now, Nudge Security began with the simple recognition that modern work runs on SaaS. In fact, our customers alone have discovered over 31,000 SaaS apps in use in their environments. And while cloud and SaaS technologies can be really great for productivity and innovation and collaboration, especially in hybrid and remote environments, it's becoming really difficult for IT and security leaders to manage and secure all of the applications, the user identities, and even all the OAuth grants that are connecting together multiple SaaS applications and sharing data. Now, in a perfect world, all of your SaaS business applications would run through a centralized front door procurement process. They would be carefully vetted by IT, security, and GRC, and they would be integrated into your single sign-on provider before any employee ever creates an account or starts uploading data. But in reality, modern SaaS adoption is highly decentralized today. In fact, according to our own product data, 90% or better of modern SaaS apps are adopted and owned by business units and individual employees outside of IT. And this can make it really difficult for IT and security teams to begin to know even what applications and identities even exist within the environment, let alone secure and manage it all. Especially when you consider that within a 1,000-person organization, a new SaaS account gets created roughly every 20 minutes. And this is where Nudge Security comes in. Our SaaS security and governance solution aligns to the realities of modern work, that even though SaaS adoption and ownership has really shifted away from IT, ultimately IT and security organizations are still accountable for all of the SaaS applications being used across the organization, and they need a modern way to handle it all at scale and at the pace of business. And that's what we do at Nudge Security. Starting at day one, we give IT security and GRC teams complete visibility of their entire SaaS estates, as well as the context and insights they need to make risk-informed decisions, as well as the automation and orchestration capabilities to help regain control over the organization's SaaS security posture without disrupting or slowing down the pace of modern work. With our platform, our customers are able to oversee the SaaS security lifecycle for all users and all applications everywhere modern work is happening without disrupting the flow of business. And today I'm going to focus in the demo specifically on some of the use cases here that you see on the employee lifecycle, starting at the beginning of helping employees understand how to get access to the tools they need for work, all the way to removing that access when an account is no longer needed or when an employee leaves the organization. But before we jump into the demo, I want to take a little bit more time to explain how nudge security works. And that's by starting at the very beginning of the problem by discovering all of your SaaS assets in your environment. This includes applications, user identities, SaaS to SaaS, OAuth integrations, and much more, giving you a complete SaaS asset inventory starting on day one. Our patented approach to SaaS discovery has zero dependencies on network proxies, endpoint agents, browser plugins, or even changes in employee behavior. So it can provide visibility into SaaS activities that are off network as well as on personal devices. And unlike other monitoring approaches, Nudge Security can even see into the past to show you SaaS accounts that have been abandoned or forgotten, or even former employees who still have active SaaS accounts. All of this information takes just a few minutes to set up, and here's how. We rely on one simple integration point with your Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 environment. Using a read-only API access, our machine learning algorithms search and analyze email records for evidence of SaaS activities. And if you think about it, anytime that you sign up for a new SaaS tool, the first thing that SaaS provider does is send you an email to say, hey, welcome Danielle to Airtable, here's your new account. Anytime you enable MFA or reset a password or invite collaborators, you usually receive an email receipt. And so this becomes a really rich log source for us to mine in order to build a continuous inventory of identities, applications, and SaaS events that are happening within your organization. In addition to this integration point, we can optionally integrate with your SSO provider, Azure or Okta, in order to layer in more information about your SaaS estate and user activities. But we don't just stop at discovery. Once we've built this inventory on the first day, then we layer in proprietary AI-powered risk insights to help you make sense of your SaaS estate so that you can quickly answer questions like, are our SaaS vendors meeting our third-party risk management criteria? Or what third-party SaaS providers have access to my SaaS data through an OAuth integration? Who's experimenting with the most AI in the organization, and what tools are they using? How many different productivity tools are we actually using, and are the ones that we can dedupe or remove that aren't being used or that are redundant? And most importantly, what does my overall SaaS attack surface and supply chain look like, because it's changing on a daily basis? Now, once we have this visibility and this context, then we can start to apply policies and take action. But the thing is that in so many cases today, IT and security folks don't have administrative privileges to the SaaS applications that they need to govern and that are owned by different business teams and individual employees. And so they typically waste a lot of time chasing down the right technical contacts or getting administrative privileges and then getting up to speed on the native security settings within each SaaS application, which of course vary from app to app. This creates a huge amount of disruptive and reactive administrative work. And so we realized that so many of these tasks, these SaaS administrative tasks and SaaS security tasks, well, they might not be fully automatable and they always might need a human conversation. We can easily redistribute some of these tasks back into the SaaS business owners and the account holders. And so this is our approach. Our human-centric approach to SaaS security orchestration really focuses on engaging the right SaaS stakeholders at the right time with simple yet effective nudges over Slack or email that guide them towards safe and compliant SaaS use. And that could include redirecting users to use an already approved application instead of introducing yet another tool, creating more sprawl, or assigning application technical context tasks to do access reviews or offboarding tasks when an employee leaves, or asking employees to review and acknowledge your AI acceptable use policy as they begin to experiment with a new tool, not at the beginning of the year, not at a once annual security awareness training session. We automate this nudging process through purpose-built playbooks that I'll show you in the demo. And this gives you a fully auditable and actionable record of all of the nudges and responses. We think that this overall approach really beats the alternative of blocking all access to unsanctioned SaaS, which really creates a lot of disruption and frustration, and in multiple studies has been proven to just encourage employees to find shadowy workarounds. All right, that's a little bit about how we work at Nudge Security, obviously a pretty brief overview, but I want to get into the demo here and actually show you some of these use cases in action of how Nudge Security can help you with SaaS identity governance. So I'm going to switch over to our demo environment here. All right, the first thing that I want to show you in this demo environment is what you'll see on the first day of getting started with Nudge Security, even in your free trial. This dashboard shows you immediately all of the SaaS applications that have been introduced recently in your organization over a certain time span, as well as key stats like who's most likely to introduce new SaaS applications, which of my applications have experienced a recent breach, and which of my applications might be experiencing some kind of outage or service disruption that could cause business delay. We can also show by the app view, we can drill down here and to get a record of all of the applications that we're using in the organization. And what's really great is I can go ahead and search by category. We automatically categorize and classify all of the SaaS applications that we discover in your environment. So if you want to take a look at all of your IT and infrastructure applications being used, or if you want to see if anyone's using, let's say, dating apps with their corporate credentials that they shouldn't be, you can also see that here. In addition to automatically categorizing, we'll show you information including what sign-on mode and SSO providers are compatible with this application. When we flip over to the account level, we start to get an idea of all of the user accounts that have been created, or the SaaS identities that have been created by your employees. When we see all of the users here, what applications they have access to, as well as the user status. So if they are an active user, if they're an archived user, or maybe suspended user because they've left the organization. And similarly, we can look at the authentication method that's being used to access the account. So if I wanted to just see all of the application or accounts that are being used through a username and password, I have that information as well. Or similarly, I can see by SSO provider. This comes in really handy when we get into offboarding employees, and we need to know whether we can just revoke that access through our SSO provider, or if we need to go in and manually reset that password to revoke access to that account. If we look down at the users and groups, we can get more information again about the users in our organization, including the organizational unit and the department, as well as an individual view of all of the accounts and applications they have access to. So you can see here, Danessa has 19 different accounts. And we'll also show you where she was the first person to create an account for this application and introduce it into the organization. We can also show you whether or not this user has multi-factor set up for their Google Workspace account, and how many of their accounts have 2FA actually enabled on their account. If I wanted to reach out to Danessa here to ask her to enable MFA on an account, that we can see is not enabled, I can quickly send her a nudge to do this. So I just go up to my nudge menu and I can ask her to enable 2FA. And this is going to send a really quick message over Slack to Danessa and ask her to enable it. And you can see she can say, yep, I've gone ahead and done it and confirm that. Or, hey, I need help with this. Can you reach out and help me? Either way, this is going to be recorded in her nudge history. And as she's responding to nudges, you'll also see what that response is here. In addition to user information, we're also showing you group information. So you can see the example here where we have a shared account, devops@nudgesecurity.dev. I can click into here and see, well, hey, what is this shared account being used to sign in for, or what is it being used as an access point? Looks like it's being used to log into an AWS environment, which might be a little concerning considering that I've got folks from sales and HR in this group. And anyone in my organization can join this DevOps group and get access to that AWS account. So this is just one of the ways that we help to surface some of the identity risks at a user and a group level within the organization. All right, let's take a look at some of the lifecycle management activities that I mentioned before. So let's start at the beginning, right? So if a user joins the organization, they need to know, how do I get access to all of the tools that I need to use for work? Now, typically you might have some sort of birthright process sitting between HR and IT. We can help amplify that. We can replace that depending on how you're set up. But what we do, there are a few ways that we help employees to make sure that they have access to the right SaaS applications that they need for work. And the first way we do that is through our application directory. So as an administrator of this environment, I can go in and I can enable an application directory that allows any employee to log into Nudge Security with limited visibility and see what applications are available to use. So this is really good for kind of day 2 onboarding, where maybe I've gotten my official things I need from IT and HR, and then there are all these team level or group level types of apps that I might not know about. So I can go ahead and search this directory. From an end user perspective, this is what it would look like. So let's say that I come in and maybe I just joined the, the finance team, and I want to see all of the applications that we're using. I can do that if I just joined as a developer or a DevOps lead, and I need to see what DevOps tool we're using in the organization. Aha, looks like we're using Datadog. Maybe I know I need access to this and I don't have it yet. I can actually see who's the technical contact. So who's the person who's going to grant me access to this application. And I can click right here to request access to the application. Again, this is going to send a nudge, not to the IT team, not to some service desk, but directly to that person who's listed as the technical contact for this app to say, hey, it looks like, Danessa's new to the organization and she needs access to Datadog. Can you go ahead and grant that? The technical contact will respond and say, yes, I've already granted access, or, I'll talk to the user and we'll resolve this access request. Either way, whenever that access is granted, keep in mind that we'll see that new account show up in our inventory. So we'll also have a record of that access being granted. Now that's great for folks who are looking for access to things that are already approved. But what if someone is just kind of wandering aimlessly and signs up for something that on their own? Well, we can also redirect them and intervene as soon as we see that application being introduced. So let's go in here and say that, let's see. I'll go to my accounts tab and we'll look at Dropbox, and it looks like Danessa signed up. Actually, I'm going to go to monday.com. Productivity tools are aplenty in modern organizations. All right, so let's say that Danessa signed up for monday.com and we saw that, and we want to redirect her to use our corporate standard application, Jira. I can go ahead and send her a nudge and say, hey, I'd like to encourage you to use Jira instead of monday.com. And this will just, again, send a quick Slack notification and say, hey, would you consider using Jira instead of Monday? A lot of times people just don't know what's out there, especially if they don't have an app directory set up. But they might also have a legitimate business reason why they need to use Monday. Maybe a partner requires it in order to work together, or they're starting some skunkworks project and for some reason Jira won't work for them. So they can provide some kind of justification there, or say, yeah, absolutely, let me delete this account and I'll switch over to Jira, so I can fire that away. And that's great on an individual basis, but what if I want to set that up to run on an ongoing basis? I can also come into my notification center and create a notification rule so that anytime there's a new account for the application monday.com, maybe I want to redirect users, then I'm going to I already set this one up. You can see like an error state here, but you're going to nudge our users and I'm going to ask them to use Jira instead. And I can add any additional custom text, like reach out to, to Vincent if you have any questions about this. I can go ahead and save that rule. And now that is set up to run automatically. So anytime someone signs up for monday.com, they're going to get a nudge to say, hey, we use Jira, please use Jira instead. Let's see, we've already walked through how to go over to enable MFA, but again, if you want to set up a rule to ensure that that employees are setting up MFA by default, we can come in here and say anytime there's a new account and the authentication, let's see here. And the auth method is username and password. Maybe we really care about MFA on things that aren't within our SSO environment. Then go ahead and nudge that user and let's ask them to enable 2FA on that. So similarly, we'll have that rule set up, and now that is set up to run automatically. Another area of the product that I want to cover, I mentioned kind of third-party or SaaS to SaaS integrations, which can also pose an access risk for organization. What we do at Nudge Security is we help you to understand this mesh of SaaS applications that are connected through OAuth grants. And we'll also assign a risk score to every grant and every individual scope here. So you can see that Zapier has access to Google. The Google ones are a little bit easier to get at. So let's look at one that's kind of outside of that environment. We've got someone who set up an OAuth integration that gives Circle CI access to our GitHub. I can review the individual scopes, and then I can also review the individual grant as well. Here I can see that this person, Departing Martinez, gave Circle CI access to GitHub as well. What's really great is I can see at the permission level what type of data, what type of access this application has to our GitHub environment. It looks like it has the ability to read and to write access to code and more. That's pretty invasive. So maybe I want to go ahead and nudge our friend here and say, hey, this is something that, we want to review. Is this justified as an OAuth grant? Are you still using this? Or I can go ahead and take the nuclear option here and revoke that OAuth grant if it is risky or no longer used. A few last things I want to show. Again, don't have time to show everything here, but a few of the other SaaS identity governance and security use cases that I think are really interesting. First of all, Nudge Security can also help you to streamline the process of getting your applications onboarded into Okta or at your SSO provider. And then we also can help you, take you through an example of how to remove abandoned accounts. So if I start this playbook here, what I can do is, here I have a summary of a completed playbook here, where again, I reached out and said, hey, do you still need access to monday.com? And we can see the response that folks gave. I think this one will be empty here, but we can say, hey, these Danessa and Departing Martinez said, no, I don't need access to it. And then we went ahead and cleaned that up. Probably the most interesting version of that from a playbook standpoint is actually when you're offboarding an employee. So what's great about Nudge Security is because we know all of the applications and accounts that an employee has access to, when they leave the organization, I can walk through step by step. And we actually guide you in this kind of list process to help you not only make sure that you archive or suspend the user within their Google Workspace or Microsoft environment, but then we're also making sure to take time to look at all of the ownership of critical resources that this employee has access to or is the owner of, making sure that we're transferring all of those things, like if he owns a repo or if he owns a domain name is a common one. And then also make sure that we're revoking any kind of app-to-app integrations, OAuth grants that have been created. That we're revoking SSO managed account as well as unmanaged accounts. So this is one of the magic tricks that we do here at Nudge Security is even if you have a username and password set up to sign into an account, we can go ahead and perform some magic to go ahead and reset that password for those unmanaged accounts automatically. And then where we're not able to do that, we can go ahead and give you the deep link so you can go ahead and reset that password manually as well. Ultimately, the point here is that we're taking you through all of the process steps that you need to do to make sure that access is fully revoked when a user leaves, and that any resources or any access to data or any licenses that they had in those SaaS applications is getting cleaned up using leveraging your technical contacts to do some of that work on your behalf. At the end, let's say that we have finished this offboarding, we get confetti, and then we get this really nice downloadable report that shows me what all Jamie has been offboarded from and what all access has been revoked. Okay, I think our report is still loading here, but I think we are about at time. So Keith, I'm going to actually turn it over to you because I think I went way over. I think we did have some questions come in, so why don't we go ahead and switch to questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for the presentation and for the demo, Danielle. Just fantastic stuff here. So we do have a lot of questions. We won't be able to get to all of them probably, but I do. It's fair to say that Nudge is going to follow up with any questions that we cannot get to on the Q&A here today. So let's ask a couple of the ones that I think are most important here. How well do employees actually engage with Nudge? Do they tend to ignore it, or is the follow-up pretty strong with this?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it comes up often. And I think this might be a fear that arises out of IT and security folks being ignored by employees, or sometimes begrudgingly going through security awareness training. What we have found, both through experimental data and through field work with our customers, is that employees are highly likely to engage with a nudge. When we think about it, most of our work is happening through real-time channels, whether that's email or Slack. And what we found is that users reported that they are about twice as likely to engage with a nudging than to follow the rules of, hey, you've hit this unsanctioned app, go back to safety, you're not allowed to use this application. So when we're talking about actually security compliance and driving security behaviors, nudging is much more effective than those kind of firewall splash screens that just prompt people to work around them.
Great. Well, I think we have time for one more question here before we let you go for today. And I wanted to find out, once you decide you're going to go with Nudge, what is the learning curve like for an admin? Does it take a long time to get set up and start using, or is it a pretty quick process?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Keith. And I'm going to make sure to flip this over to make sure folks know that we do have a 14-day free trial. It's completely self-serviceable, which I think is an indicator of how simple it is to get started with Nudge Security. You can go in and jump in the tool and actually get started right away. It takes just a few minutes to get connected. It's really simple to connect it to your Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace environment, and then you'll start to get that SaaS inventory. On average, our customers get that SaaS inventory within about 75 minutes. It's incredibly intuitive. Obviously, we're here for support, and for folks who want to run a more traditional POC, we're always happy to chat with them as well. But everyone can get started with that free trial, and I highly encourage folks to just go play around with the product themselves.
I think we can all agree that free is good, right? Great stuff here. Such important content that you've provided here today. I think just the ability to keep an eye on shadow IT, which continues to be a big problem in the industry, and to ensure that that employees are getting up to speed with multi-factor authentication. Just those two things alone are going to be huge for companies going forward. So Danielle, thanks so much for your time and for presenting today. It was really a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Keith.
So that was a lot of fun, Danielle. Thanks again for that look into how Nudge is helping keep organizations more secure. So time for our next poll question, and this looks similar to other ones. We do appreciate your feedback on resources you'd like to see from Nudge. I also want to remind everyone about the handouts. Nudge has a link on how to get started with their solution, so make sure to click on that. Thanks to everybody who's responding to the poll. We very much appreciate the feedback. I'll just leave it up here for another moment or two before we move on to our next presentation. So more from Nudge here. Let's see. Keep voting, keep voting. And we are now going to click over and introduce our next session. This one comes to you from CyberArk. And Jimmy Mia is going to be dropping knowledge on us today. He is the senior solutions engineer for identity with CyberArk. So Jimmy is in the house. He is ready to go and he knows what to do. So I am going to turn this show over to him.
Thanks, Keith. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Hi, everyone. My name is Jimmy Mia. I'm a senior identity solutions engineer here at CyberArk. I'm going to cover some IAM best practices and keys to success that can help you enhance your organization's security posture. All right. Before we dive into the keys to success for IAM, let's take a look at the market trends driving the need for enhanced identity access management for organizations. It's important to note it's a combination of factors. There are economic factors, geopolitical factors, cultural factors, just to name a few, that are driving these trends. The first is the expulsion of identities. Organizations are continuing to invest in digital and cloud initiatives, but for every connection between people and applications and processes, an identity is required to authenticate, human or machine. With the amount of identities being created, this makes it critical to safeguard those identities and make sure that the sensitive corporate data and the identities that are connected to that information can't be compromised. As we've seen in recent cyber attacks on larger enterprises, this has become very important. Second, we're seeing that the security leaders are finding IT admins and other privileged user accounts that have high level access are not adequately secured. It seems that the proliferation of, let me do that one more time. It seems that the proliferation of identities in general could be influencing this trend. Third, we're seeing that cyber criminals are continuing to deploy sophisticated attacks on organizations, industry, and regions. They have no plans of stopping this. It's very lucrative for them to do these things. Nearly 75% of organizations paid ransoms over the last 12 months. Fourth, it's a good trend to see that 31% of organizations are planning to automate access and provisioning and deprovisioning this year to shrink the attack surface and clean up misconfigured, unused access permissions and reduce that risk exposure. What these trends tell us together is that the identities can be the problem or the solution for organizations. What matters is how your organization approaches securing the many identities that exist. So we're going to get into the keys to IAM success here. But for every user that begins in the workforce, they have to traverse this risk spectrum and between foundational and high risk access use case, depending upon the tools that they need to do their jobs with, the tasks that they're performing. Any workforce user can become a high risk user, and therefore monitoring, enforcement, and continuous controls beyond the login are essential to secure that access. So when we look at this conceptually, your cloud environment is no different from the office, where security extends from the moment it leaves the building to the cloud portals and infrastructure your workforce users use to access important and sensitive information to do their jobs. Attackers know the workforce user has often standing and pervasive access to on-premise endpoints and the applications they're connected to. The attacker is counting on using that low-powered account to move laterally through environments to achieve greater access into your cloud environments. We've seen over the last several months, IT technicians become a favorite go-to for attackers. Zero standing privilege also greatly reduces the risk of compromised access for securing the workforce. Just in time also reduces that access, but it does not impact the use of that access, especially on the endpoint. Unsecured endpoints are easy targets for attackers. Standing access represents for the greatest risk And often this is where privileged access controls can be effective, but they need a mature IAM strategy that works with smart automation to close the open-ended access loop. We're going to get into how to elevate your IAM strategy with the 3 keys to success. So let's get into this. So we're going to look at our first pillar, built for security, loved by the workforce. And you definitely want your workforce to love what you're doing. As we highlight the challenges involved in a perimeterless enterprise and how traditional controls, which weren't really designed with those things in mind, are really ineffective today against growing the attack surface. Those controls are often heavily focused on securing the endpoint and network and reduce the importance. At the same time, these identities are turning into the most critical line of defense for businesses to get right. The inability to govern, manage, and secure and protect every action would leave the enterprise at constant risk. While it is critical to highlight that each of those workforce identities, while performing their duties, can at any point in time traverse that risk spectrum, moving towards high risk access, depending upon the tools that they use to access provided and the tasks that they're performing. At the same time, when the identity is elevated, this is where they are the most targeted and constantly under attack for initial access or simply to further enhance the expanding laterally across the enterprise strategy and technique for attackers. Let's look at the few examples where a workforce user identity risk is elevated and therefore at the highest risk. So this can be for a range of personas. This can be for a developer or a DevOps engineer who has access to source code or sensitive tools that can easily impact the organization's production environment. This can also be a third-party vendor that needs to access a corporate resource from a remote location as an important business function. This introduces exposure to sensitive data and further extending your organization's supply chain risk. This can also be a workforce team member that has access to a financial system with high privileges based upon his role or responsibility. However, this role, which may lead to a compromise of intellectual property or data theft, and these are just things that you want to avoid. To recap the important note here, we must understand that every workforce user is at greater risk and therefore additional monitoring and control is required. Now you're probably asking yourself, how can CyberArk help? So when we look at this, we break out the secure workforce access management. When you onboard your workforce or people that you do business with, oftentimes the process to deprovision access is missed, and you end up with this pervasive standing access. Replace standing access with policy-based access. Personas that need regular access to elements in the cloud experience a policy that goes into effect at the moment of that access, and they do so without any delay, connecting users to apps and systems that they need with dynamic privilege access that works with adaptable IAM. And for high-risk workforce users, this usually involves extended IT to include IT admins, IT operations, third-party vendors, developers across different engineering teams, DevSecOps teams, and data scientists. Here we see a tighter control to ensure the standing identities are vaulted with privileged access management. These are often the built-in admin identities on those machines, which also need to be protected, but also done so with session isolation in mind. For any workloads in the cloud that often exist for a short amount of time, traditional IAM provisioning does not work here and requires more dynamic solution to keep up with the speed of cloud operations. Secure high-risk access with privileged access management. And for workforce credentials that live in spreadsheets or unsecured browsers, this creates a great barrier for security and operations. There is no visibility into what is safe and acceptable for corporate standards and what is personal data. Oftentimes, we see lots of interesting information here, like grandma's password, service accounts with weak passwords that are used everywhere and don't change. Workforce Password Manager allows users to use safe password sharing and provide centralized approach to monitor business passwords. All right, let's get into the second area, integrate endpoint security. So we want to dive into this one just a little bit and cover all the different things we can do as an admin, which is a lot. You have complete control of the system, right? You can change system configuration. You can install or disrupt critical business services, uninstall antivirus, uninstall drivers, remove applications, hide undetected into those programs and systems as a Trojan horse. And this is where 90 to 95% of malware requires local admin rights to do the most damage to gain the persistence that it needs. This is also a way to create a backdoor account to modify user identities, can take control over user identities and access the data that belongs to those users. So if this is such a problem, everyone would clearly do the same thing and remove local admin rights, right? No. This is because removing admin rights also removes the flexibility and alienates and impacts productivity. So basic things like installing a printer, adding a new monitor become problematic without admin rights. Instead, we should have a clear understanding about our endpoints and the identity and use cases by integrating them with step-up authentication, SIM monitoring, and help desk platforms. All right, let's get into the third area for smart automation as a force multiplier. So automation and orchestration help in lots of different ways. They help manage life cycles, they help manage configurations, events and event responses, data and relationships. They also help manage data aggregation, data transformation, and data synchronization. The problem is that keeping up with these identities in sync between different systems is really inaccurate and time-consuming and still very manual. You need to ensure that the identity is the right identity during that onboarding sequence. So a system like Flows monitors those external sources or is triggered to take a lifecycle management action into virtually any configured application. Flows connects with virtually any third-party identity verification service to build and help secure any onboarding workflow desired in the most administrated way, in the most easily administered way. Now, when you're building this logic, a lot of times the process is very manual. Things get missed, things don't get followed up with. And this is where working across those different systems is insecure and inefficient, and they don't allow for any exception to a rule or program, or don't allow for any new conditions that might arise. Flows lets you work directly within a single app in response to events that they manage using a pub-sub model. Being able to automate the flows of data between different technologies to manage secure and unify identities and environments has become more popular with low-code, no-code builders and does not require an extensive programming or developer background. As the workforce grows, CyberArk enables secure access by consolidating identities into a single unified directory to view, manage, scale to millions of users for all use cases. However, at the same time, it's also flexible. It seamlessly integrates with other directories via REST and SCIM APIs without any replication of data required. From there, a true end-to-end passwordless authentication is available to federate access across the enterprise. Once login is secured, a CyberArk workforce solution extends the protection beyond the login and continuously monitors, records, and protects sessions, all while analyzing user behavior across every step of the way, alerting whenever abnormal or malicious activity is detected and tracked, and adapting across all of those systems at the same time. The next critical layer is identity governance, where smart workflows are automated to ensure you're audit ready, meeting all compliance mandates, and are ready to report on them while staying secure with zero standing privileges in access and authorization to enterprise-wide applications. As we have a workforce user who attempts to access an application, the system obtains relevant context, applies multi-factor authentication, and federates access to applications with single sign-on. So far, nothing is different here, enabling access as we know it. Let's see how CyberArk reinvents security-first access all from a single platform. The same workforce user, but now additional controls on the endpoint are taking place to ensure the risk of a compromised machine. On the endpoint, CyberArk Secure Browser is used to secure a controlled gateway to every enterprise application and resource. These controls are not optional. Let's expand. Additional context is captured by adaptive passwordless authentication taking place to federated applications. But what all those applications cannot do is use single sign-on, maybe because they're legacy applications and they just weren't built that way. This is where an enterprise-grade and native to platform password manager is required. Once access is provided, we've highlighted the need to go beyond the login and further secure sensitive and high-risk actions within the session. CyberArk enables you to record, monitor, control, and further protect every action performed, all while the behavior is captured, analyzed against a baseline of behavior to alert, adapt in any case of suspicious activity, all within a single platform. But there's more. Automating access governance across a complete identity lifecycle with a no-code workflow to maintain compliance and access reviews. To what end? So what you can do is reduce identity risks, decrease the cost of governance, and accelerate secure access across the workforce. So let me start with highlighting why we're here. CyberArk traditionally started with the hardest part of identity security. Now, are you there? Securing high-risk access for privileged accounts. Security is in our DNA. We've taken all the years of experience across 8,000 plus customer feedback and extended those same intelligent privilege controls to form a new operating model to radically different and workforce identity protection, a security first one. Let's see how we're going to do this. Centered on intelligent privilege controls, the CyberArk Identity Security Platform seamlessly integrates and secures human and machine-based identities, accessing from hybrid to multi-cloud environments, and flexibly automates the identity lifecycle, all within a unified approach. Thank you, and I hope to talk to you again. Keith, back to you.
And you're going to talk with us again, Jimmy, for sure, right now. Are you ready, sir, for some attendee questions?
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent. Great presentation, Jimmy. Enjoyed that a lot. While we get these questions ready, I'm going to start throwing up some poll questions for CyberArk. They have got some additional questions as well, and I'm going to go through those as we go through the Q&A. The first one is up here. What additional information would you like about the CyberArk solution? Let us know as we get going with these questions today. All right. First one is from Brian. Jimmy, how does CyberArk manage password vaulting and password rotation, hopefully helping to mitigate the risk of potential theft or misuse of those credentials?
Yeah, this is a great question. We see this a lot, right? Really where the problem is systemic is because everyone knows what those secrets and credentials are. So the potential for theft or misuse is really great there. So what we do is we take a least privilege approach to number one, discovery and proper identification of these high-risk accounts. That way we can inventory them and categorize them and figure out the proper structure to manage those identities with intelligent automation. The reality is a lot of these accounts have a lot of services attached to them and can be used for other day-to-day operations, for mission critical tasks. So you have to be careful. You can't just go in and start throwing in rotation into the mix without properly understanding about, number one, where the identities are, how they're used, and then number two, who needs access to those identities. But that is a great question. Thank you for that, Brian.
Oh, for sure. All right, let's move on and get to the next poll question. Which IAM capability are you looking to implement in 2024? Let us know now while we are going through the questions. We have an interesting one from Anil, who wants to know the 3 keys to success, which you mentioned earlier. You had a slide on this: secure workforce access, implementing endpoint security, and smart automation. Where do you place logging and auditing? I assume you're thinking about something under one of those broader categories. Is that accurate to say?
I'm sorry, is that a question for me?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Sorry, that was from Anil. Where would you place logging and auditing within those 3 keys to success?
Definitely it goes right up there with probably smart automation. Our claim to fame is not logging and automation, and we rely, heavily with collaborating with our security partners who excel in those areas, right? That, is of great importance for people who need to log and aggregate and consume that kind of data at scale. We do a pretty good job of it. We're not here to make that claim. Being the best in breed. So that's why it's important that we work together as a team, really as a unit, with other vendors that do a really good job of that. So I would really place that probably into that smart automation area, where you might have a unique trigger based upon a specific kind of logging event that happens, and then figure out what you want to do, because there is a difference between being proactive and being reactive to the types of logging and information that you might need.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to remind everyone, this poll question is still up here. So keep on voting while I get to the next question. So Jimmy, you mentioned about the controls that you can add to the solution. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me, the question is, can you tell me more about the controls I can add to secure high-risk user access?
Yeah, definitely. This is a big trendy one. As we see lots of companies adopt and lift and shift to the cloud. But what I want to do is kind of break that down into basic terms before we get into controls, because it's not just about traditional IAM access in general terms to reduce IAM cloud risk. And this is where CyberArk provides insight that can turn into action. The main elements include identification of dormant accounts and roles. We can remove them to reduce that attack surface. And then we talk about identification of violations of best practices in IAM cloud configurations, and then delivery of programmable remediation and instructions. This identification process is key when we're talking about identification of standing privilege in the cloud, especially in order to migrate to a zero standing permissions with just-in-time elevation. Constant identification of unmanaged privilege local and cloud accounts to automatically vault them in a privilege access manager, and with extensive excessive permissions, and then design least privilege policies based upon user behavior analytics. And lastly, take care of those secrets in those cloud secret managers to ensure that they're secure and managed automatically with a robust secret manager. So where we see this being the most effective control is by replacing that standing access with a policy-based daily access, for example. When we replace that standing entitlement with a zero standing privilege-based policy, we introduce the only change the user will need to see and experience. When you use it this way, the user is subject to these controls, will need to choose a role defined and, say, a daily access a way to receive access without delay, and this really removes many risks.
All right, that is perfect. All right, I'm going to put the last poll question up here while we dive into the final question. What is your top IAM priority in 2024? Let us know. Start voting in that. And I think we got time for one more question here. Now, I want to add here that any questions we didn't get to today, and there are a number of them, that CyberArk will be following up on all of these questions, so you won't get missed if we don't get to your question today. So finally today for you, Jimmy, how does CyberArk tackle IAM differently than other vendors? So I guess another way to ask that is how do you distinguish yourself from the competition in this space, which, let's face it, is pretty stiff?
Sure, and this is definitely an area that we're different in for sure, and this is done by becoming a key in the identity security solution with our customers' technology journey. I did saw a question asked in the poll there. Are you seeing companies want to consolidate across vendors, and that's primarily for lots of different motivations. You talk about the technology debt, but also the people that you trust with. CyberArk has been a leader in identity security from the get-go. We've built our foundation upon that success, and this is what we're using to ensure that they're secure and will remain long-term customers. A key differentiator for CyberArk is the ability to provide access with zero standing privileges, also known as dynamic access, for cloud services and for maintenance of existing infrastructure workloads. While this approach is usually led with security in mind, it's always done with a customer-first mindset, working collaboratively with our users, our customers, but also with our greater security partner network.
All right. Fantastic stuff. Well, Jimmy, we're going to have to let you go at this point then, but I want to thank you so much for your time and your insights in the Q&A and the presentation, which was just fantastically illuminating. So thank you for educating us on CyberArk, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
All right. And I want to remind everyone that CyberArk also has a handout in that handout section. They have a link to a solution brief on identity security built for your workforce. That is absolutely something you should check out right now. And I want to thank all of you attendees for responding to these polls. We appreciate your feedback so much on these things. And now with that, it is time to get to the next presentation in our event, and this one comes from the good folks over at Rubrik. And presenting for Rubrik today is Nick Calamani, a solutions engineer. Now, Jess is going to be joining Nick for Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation, so keep those questions coming in. Nick, it is awesome to have you here today. You have the floor.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Now, you may be thinking, Rubrik, aren't they those backup and ransomware recovery folks? Why are they here at a conference about identity management? But the truth is that there's a story around that as well. The complicated nature of security in an organization today has gotten a lot more prolific than it was in days past. So I'm going to walk everyone through a little bit of the backstory about why we even exist, what we do, and then how that plays very crucially in the space of identity management. So to set the stage, as I mentioned, business data is under attack. Applications can be reinstalled and recovered, but the data of your business is usually irreplaceable. If the business loses its data, the business no longer exists, quite frankly. And obviously, we're all familiar with traditional infrastructure security, prevention at the edge, firewall, email security, phishing detection, things of that nature. And then now we're also seeing, SIEM and SOAR tooling as kind of a more advanced way for organizations to centralize the security. But at kind of the bottom of that entire stack is the data left kind of out in the open, unprotected. And obviously, there's a huge amount of investment going into, perimeter security and infrastructure security. And by no means should anyone attempt to replace that. But there's something more that needs to happen here. So again, I mentioned at Rubrik, something we're very focused on is zero trust as it applies to data security and the backups. So on the front lines every day, I'm talking to customers who have either been through a ransomware attack or are trying to prepare for one, whether that be for compliance reasons or just internal risk initiatives. And these are kind of just the anatomy of an attack. So obviously folks break in, they load their malware, they start going around your network, they steal data now. They don't just encrypt your data, they steal it so that they can go ahead and extort you, blackmail you with that later. And then naturally, they'll go ahead and they'll compromise the backup platform. Again, perimeter has always been, we lock that down, but we leave the backups kind of out in the open over NFS or SMB, what have you. And then, of course, at the end, they finish the encryption of their attack, and then they leave you a ransom note. But if you read in between the lines in all of these, identity plays into all of these. Obviously, we've got, hundreds of 0 days being discovered quite regularly now. But if someone has compromised your credentials, they can do all this without some kind of crazy 0-day exploit chain. And as Jess said at the beginning of the event, passwords are no longer enough, right? So that's kind of why Rubrik exists. We really do believe this. It's not only a catchy tagline, but it's really true. When your data's down, your business is down. So we're here to provide a new approach, which is not to replace infrastructure security, but to add data security on top of that using zero trust principles and design frameworks from day one. A quick overview of kind of what we do. Obviously, in the far left, we've got data resilience. This is what I'm going to spend most of our time on today, talking about zero trust and what we do to protect people from attacks within the perimeter of identity, so to speak. The middle column is our observability, so whether this is our solutions to discover sensitive data across your entire data footprint, cloud and prem, things like PII, HIPAA data. We also, of course, have our ransomware and encryption detection capabilities. And then finally, our ability to recover both at scale and to do compliance auditing with just a couple clicks. Really saves a lot of time. And this, again, it was kind of built under NIST security standards. So we obviously, all three stages, preparation, detection, and containment. So I mentioned that just briefly, we're one solution for on-prem and cloud. Quite simply, we're a software company. We didn't look at this as we're trying to just get storage widgets out the door. We wanted to build a software stack that was not only scalable, but also secure from day one. So whether this is our on-premises appliance or you're protecting your Microsoft 365 workload with our cloud native tooling, it doesn't really matter. And again, identity is core. If you're logging in to dozens of disparate systems and backup proxies and all that stuff, you're exposing even greater attack surface. So we've consolidated the whole stack down to one solution. On the piece of data resilience, we've got kind of some interesting trends coming on. Like back in the day, one was backing up just for the purpose of, okay, someone deletes a file, or, our data center got hit by a hurricane, things of that nature, or maybe a compliance risk. But now it's a different discussion. We're not backing up for the same reasons. Nowadays, we're backing up because someone is maliciously trying to get in and cause disruption. These are criminal acts, and the solution has to be different, right? We can no longer assume that even administrators can be trusted. And that's where we start to tie in to the identity management and perimeter security story. So we built our own file system. I made a little jab earlier. We don't just have backups over NFS. We have proprietary protocols that we've developed for communication. Zero trust was very serious for us. So our file system is immutable from the start. You don't have to just toggle that setting. That is something that comes out of the box with no additional setup. We also made that file system append only. So once data is written, it really can't be edited. We're very serious about that, and there's checksumming and hashing along the way to make sure that stays true. From an logical air gap perspective, again, we don't use open network protocols, and we built everything on RESTful APIs. More importantly, those APIs are secured and authenticated both internally and externally, which means that even system services on our Rubrik system, premise, or cloud don't have access to the data. So again, we took zero trust very seriously. We don't even trust our own nodes in a cluster, whether they be, again, hardware or a Kubernetes scale in the cloud, for example. TLS communications on the back end, and certificate authentication of all cluster members. So that's where that encryption everywhere comes in. Data encryption at rest is great. Encryption at the network to clients is great, but backend is important as well. So that really just kind of emphasizes the zero trust design. And at the very bottom there, I mentioned a little earlier administrator trust, right? And so we've got a couple of methods that we prevent administrators from causing problems. So just to quickly, I took a couple quotes from some of the other wonderful speakers that are on this conference. From obviously Ping, we can see that, you know, credential stuffing is becoming a major threat. And then Keeper determined that 81% of breaches are password related credentials, things like that. So the threat is no longer just, again, exploit change and other good stuff. Once someone has entered the environment, we got to protect within it. So we try to prevent administrator compromise and human error, of course. So the first step of that on the right, you can see multi-factor authentication and one-time passwords. This is something we've had for years. This isn't something we just bolted on in a reactionary fashion. This has been supported for a long time. But we go a step further than preventing, you know, someone who shouldn't get on the system from getting in. You know, we do retention lock. So this is basically an administrator can't come in and just expire everything on the system. And we do that in two ways. One is we either have a second approver for every destructive request. So the system is smart enough to determine, hey, they're trying to shrink retention from 30 days to 30 seconds. I'm going to ask a compliance officer or whoever you designate to make sure that's valid. But if you've got to go a step further, we actually do have a harder retention lock that requires engaging Rubrik support to verify your identity. And this is actually something that SEC and FINRA compliant for those who need that additional protection. The immutable file system I talked a little bit about earlier, but zero trust, we got very serious. The administrators do not have access to the file system. And again, everything we do is API calls. So you can obviously do an API call to view data in the GUI or to restore data, but you're getting a proxied copy of that data. You're not getting the underlying storage. So again, we're taking it a step further. We're making sure that daily administration is not necessarily impeded, but that you don't have to worry so much about a global admin going rogue or having an account compromise event to delete the data in the underlying system. And now, a little bit more fun than just doom and gloom, the world's ending, someone's stealing my data or deleting it, is what we can do with identity. So we've got a very granular role-based access control framework. And because of how securely our platform is built, we have the ability to very granularly assign access based on individual users or groups, and even SSO integration as well. I'll talk about that in a sec. But the benefit here, as our friends at StrongVM were just speaking about, is now you can get users access to self-service for their own data without exposing a huge security risk to the entire organization. So imagine your database administrators, they don't necessarily want to give up access to their own backups, right? So you tell them you're coming in with some kind of crazy secure appliance. They don't understand, they're not necessarily thrilled about that. But then you can tell them, hey, look, I can give you access to not only administer all these backups, but do whatever you need to do with them, restore them, view them, and still put authentication locks, potentially prevent them from accidentally deleting something, or again, like I referred to earlier, two-person rule. So DBA obviously may need to delete backups at some time, but let's give a second check within the organization to make sure that that's not malicious. From obviously, from an API-based approach, we have a lot more flexibility and integration. So we can integrate with ServiceNow, but pretty much anything is supported. Anything that uses RESTful APIs under the covers. Today we have integrations, for example, with Okta, Azure, Active Directory, and then pretty much anything else that's SAML 2.0 compliant. But we also have a website. Actually, it's just, you can get to it from our homepage. There's no crazy goofiness, where we publish all of our APIs. So one can theoretically build their own integrations. A popular purpose for that is, SIEM and SOAR tool integration. Obviously, you want your SIEM tooling to get a ransomware alert from Rubrik directly. So we provide all the tools necessary to make that possible. And with that, I want to leave everyone with one question before we open up Q&A, and that is, can you delete your own data and your own backups today? Because if you can, that means someone else can too.
That's a great point, Nick. I'm guessing a lot of us hadn't thought about that. It's
definitely a weird question to ask oneself, right? We don't traditionally think about that.
Well, it makes sense. It's, as soon as you sort of put some thought into it, just if it's accessible, it's accessible. So interesting. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for that wonderful presentation and for sticking around to answer some questions. I want to jump into some questions. And actually, this one might play into what you just asked our audience here. Nick, can you speak to, are Rubrik backups really immutable?
Yeah, they are. So not only from a file system perspective of the nature of the file system being such that old data cannot be overwritten. Now, obviously, we have cleanup services and maintenance processes that expire that older data when it's supposed to be expired. But again, we basically implemented micro-segmentation in our application. So there's no potential for rogue access to do those operations, because it's a non-routable, secured, and internal-only API that does such tasks.
Okay. We have some questions about how this would actually work for a company in terms of cloud, on-prem, hybrid, VM. Can you just address that briefly as well?
Yeah, of course. And this is a common question. I mean, again, we're a software company, so while we have a hyper-converged appliance you can put on-premise to run the entire stack. There's no additional proxies or virtual machines needed to make this all work. It's just an appliance. The same holds true in the cloud. So we're running the exact same software stack in the cloud. It can either be customer deployed or we host it. But the benefit here is that if you're all cloud, you don't need a hardware appliance, because data born in the cloud should stay in the cloud. That's kind of our view on it. And, our 365, just to kind of hit on that, a lot of folks, it's gotten a lot of traction recently, not only due to the Microsoft investment in Rubrik, but also just because people don't realize that, oh my gosh, just because my data's in the cloud, I didn't realize I still had to protect that. So again, cloud premise, we don't care. And I do want to harp on, it is the same interface to manage both. Seriously, it's one URL. There's not 4 GUIs. It really is one GUI. So we're very proud of that.
Well, I think you may have just answered. Patrick was asking that question as you were answering it. So Patrick, let us know if you need any more clarification on that. Okay, curious about the SSO providers that you integrate with.
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned obviously, Okta, Azure Active Directory, and some of the others. But I mean, again, the list of folks we can integrate with theoretically is infinite if they support, kind of a RESTful API approach, or they're SAML 2.0 compliant. Again, just because we built a stack that's API based, we're pretty flexible in what we can do. So for a lot of things, we just truthfully don't have a compatibility list, if you will, because it'd be like saying, well, you can drive a Toyota, so you can only drive a Toyota. That's just silly. You get behind the wheel of an API, and it'll work with anything pretty much.
Okay, so yeah, I'm hearing a lot of flexibility basically for whatever, however someone's approaching this. Okay, here's an interesting one. What do you see most of your users using role-based access control for?
Yeah, so we have a lot of folks that have like a compliance requirement to hold on to executive emails for 7 years, let's say. So many folks create like a compliance team role within the Rubrik environment, which, by the way, you can create a user and a group and all that within Rubrik and have Rubrik manage that, or you can inherit that from Active Directory. So if there's like a compliance team Active Directory, Rubrik can very quickly be configured to inherit that. It's not really a big deal. So they'll create a compliance team where those compliance team users can only access the backups for that executive. They can't even see anything else in the environment. They can't make any changes to backup system administration or policies. And so again, it's just kind of an automated way to get people to the resources they need to do their jobs without having to do manual work every time someone wants to see it.
Well, I love that. And Nick, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer this one because this might be a little bit more of a niche topic, but we have Deb here, by the way, mentioning that she's already a big fan and excited to learn more. She's wondering, though, if Rubrik would help her organization pass a cyber insurance audit. Is that something that you can address, or maybe some advice on where she could get that answered?
Yeah, actually, that's something we get a lot. Many folks come to us because they got declined on an insurance policy, or perhaps their rate was, quadrupling for renewal. So not only do we have the ability to test, like quite literally do instantaneous testing of to basically verify that we can do mass recoveries or restorations and things like that, but we also have very granular reporting tools. We have a bunch of stuff built in, but you can also customize to get reports specific to your needs. And then we also have, again, I mentioned that we're certified. A number of our functionalities are certified by third-party firms for FINRA or SEC compliance. So we have capabilities around that too. So it's kind of the sky's the limit. I know that that's kind of a weird catch-all answer, but it's really true. we took flexibility very seriously.
I'm picking up on that. Okay, a great question here. You had mentioned using Snow for self-service for DBAs. What other use cases are you seeing this self-service functionality being used?
Yeah, I mean, it could be even something as simple as, Bob in accounting accessing his own Exchange M365 backups. He sends a report to the CIO and then realize, oh crap, I actually saved that as a draft and then accidentally deleted my draft folder or something like that. You can have literally any end user self-servicing their own stuff. The sky's the limit. And again, they're only able to see what they're assigned to, whether that be the virtual infrastructure admin can only see the VMware environment, or the AWS RDS administrator can only see his databases in AWS. And then you can also further restrict if they even have any ability to administer the protection policies for their own objects, or if it's just purely view only, as you would do probably for an end user.
Okay, well, I keep hearing sky's the limit and unlimited flexibility. These are all amazing things. So if somebody out there in the audience, Nick, has just totally fallen head over heels with these ideas and this wonderful picture that we're getting today. You mentioned going and visiting the website, but remind us again, what's the first step to getting started? What do you recommend to everyone in the audience today that might want to get rolling with Rubrik?
Yeah, I mean, so the website is a great place to start. Not only does it outline some of our solutions, but because of all of our stack is software-based, you can actually launch POCs for certain things right then and there in a web browser. Like for 365 protection, for example, you could just start a POC right then and there. But of course, you can also reach out to us and someone like myself or whoever your account team may be can do a demo and very, very quickly. It's a pretty straightforward approach.
I love that. Well, Nick, honestly, I wish we could keep going. We've got some great questions, but we do have to wrap there. If you have the time, please feel free to hang out and chat with some folks on live chat. For everyone who's submitting questions still, Rubric and Nick will follow up with you. And Nick, once again, thank you so much for such a fascinating presentation today.
Of course. Thank you.
And thank you to both Nick and Jess. What a great Q&A. I love the long ones where you can get in depth here. Just terrific stuff. You guys are killing it with your questions today. Just FYI, so many good ones coming in for all of these sessions. So throwing up the poll question right now. It might look familiar to you. What additional information would you like about the rubric solution? Let us know in that poll. And a reminder to go over to the handouts section where there is a link to the rubric website so you can get more information on all the stuff Nick was discussing today. And thanks to everybody responding to the poll. That feedback is critical to us and to our sponsors. And with that, we're going to give away another Amazon gift card. Another $300 prize like the first one. And the winner of this one is Jamie Mastrio from Connecticut. One of those. Congratulations to you, Jamie. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. Now, it is time for our next presentation. Keeper Security is up next. And I'd like to introduce everyone to Tom Cole, a solutions engineer. It is great to see you, Tom. I'll be joining you for some Q&A after the presentation. Looking forward to that. So please take it away.
Thanks, Keith, and very happy to be here today. And what I'd like to discuss with you now is Keeper's next generation privileged access management. So first of all, just a few quick statistics just to outline why we're here today and what the main problems is that our solution's addressing. So first of all, stolen and weak passwords are the leading causes of data breaches for an organization. However, most will have very, very little visibility or control over their staff's hygiene in this area. And this creates a massive hole in the organization's security posture. And it could be so easily fixed with an effective password management system in play. Now, when organizations do get this level of visibility, quite often what they find is that a large portion of their users' passwords will be both not complex and also reused across multiple applications. Now, this second figure here in regards to that 62%. So 62% without a password management solution in place is very, very difficult to provide a secure way to share credentials that doesn't involve a plain text approach. And even things like sharing credentials through like Slack or Teams or other instant messages, you're still sending across sensitive data in plain text. And that final statistic there, 99% of attacks that could be prevented with 2FA in place. And the main problem around the 2FA is that a lot of users will actually see it as an inconvenience, disrupting their workflow since they have to go through their second device to generate the code instead of that additional layer of security that it's actually providing. And taking these three figures into consideration, some real good food for thought here is that while a lot of organizations will only offer a password manager to a specific team, specifically teams that have a higher level of access, really all users become part of the same chain, just with varying degrees of privileges. And what I'm hoping that the main takeaway from today's session will be is how Keeper can protect against all the above scenarios and no longer just in a traditional password-based approach, across your development and your virtualized environments as well. Onto the secret side of things. So if we think about a typical development environment and in particular the DevOps who are responsible for it. So they will be managing and also utilizing a large number of secrets day in, day out. And for a developer, their main focus will really be the availability of the systems as opposed to the actual security behind it. Quite typically, what we see happening is that secrets, such as your API keys or passwords, they get stored all over the place. And quite often, this will mean that the secrets may be hard-coded into the development platform itself, or else stored inside the platform's very own independent secret manager, creating multiple different points for failure. Again, since developers will be using multiple different platforms, the risk here grows considerably each time. And even just taking security out of the equation here, a simple password change inside one of these production environments can run the risk of bringing down all these different builds, because the developer themselves will have no clear visibility into all the spots a secret is being used, and the process of actually doing that update is quite manual as well. And the third component that we're talking about today is connections. So if we think of traditional PAM solutions out there, and their main goal really is to allow a simplified means for users to access different environments but in a secure manner. And the solutions themselves will be able to facilitate the creation of secure connections through different protocols such as your SSH, RDP. And unfortunately, this does come with quite a heavy trade-off. And the main problem that organizations find with these solutions is a very long and complex deployment stage. For example, things like setting up secure connections, integrating with your existing infrastructure, and configuring different access policies can all be very challenging and a very cumbersome process overall. So the kind of traditional PAM solutions all need to integrate seamlessly with these different systems, such as your operating systems, databases. So overall, while the goal is quite a desirable position to be in to have this working PAM solution, the pathway to actually achieving it is one that a lot of organizations simply won't have the time and resources to reach, even with the traditional software in place. And this pathway can be made up of a lot of different components. For example, not enough budget for the required PS hours, which is essential for any legacy PAM solution. Without that PS, very, very difficult to provision alone. And then along with having PS for deployment, this same PS will also be required for the onboarding and training of your staff, which again is a very difficult thing to achieve alone without that kind of resource in place. So when we take these different downsides into an account with the traditional PAM solutions that we all kind of know from over the years, it points to three very common themes across this space. And the first one there is that solutions are far too complex for most organizations' use cases, and they really need to be simplified down. Also, while they are very comprehensive solutions, quite a lot of the features themselves remain unused by the majority of users. And then thirdly, like we discussed earlier, additional dedicated resources required to actually manage and maintain the solution itself. So mainly pointing towards traditional PAM solutions not being very cost effective for many organizations, both in the cost for the actual product and the additional personnel that are required to manage it. And this brings us on to Keeper's PAM offering, or Keeper's next generation PAM solution. So Keeper's PAM was essentially designed for today's environments, and with the three main pain points that we just discussed on the last slide taken into consideration. So what this means is that it combines the three most critical components of a PAM solution: secrets manager, the password management, and the connections, minusing the high costs, excess features, and the complexity that is attributed to your traditional PAM solutions. So what I'd like to do now is to just give a rundown and a high-level overview of those three core components that we have. First off, Keeper's Enterprise Password Manager. So this gives you full visibility of your user's password hygiene across the entire organization, and also a very easy means to improve. And it does this by providing each user with their own secure password vault that can be accessed from any device in any location. We're also a fully zero-knowledge solution. This means that all the data that we store in the cloud is encrypted text, or it's deciphered text, and the key required to decrypt this information is all generated and stored locally on your end users' machines. Keeper will also integrate very easily with all the main IDPs to allow for single sign-on and easy user management from the administrative side, and the IT admins can also enforce different policies for things like password complexity, sharing, and also run reports to gain full visibility across the organization. Now, what I'd like to do now really is just to give a quick demonstration of the tool, and specifically what I'd like to focus on is the different types of data we can store inside the vault, how information can be very easily shared, how Keeper can notify you of any breached passwords in use, and finally how admins can gain visibility across the organization. So I'm just going to cut across now to the Keeper Password Manager that we have right here. And first of all, just to discuss the different types of data we can store. This will really range down to the different record types we provide. So it's very comprehensive, comprising of your traditional logins, PI, file attachments, server credentials, anything that you wanted to create that isn't stored in this list. Keeper also provides very granular options to create your own custom record types from scratch. And to just show you what that flow would be like for creating a traditional login, Keeper provides the username password fields. You have Keeper's password generator to guarantee that you're no longer using pattern or dictionary based passwords. You can choose the full criteria for this here as well. And then also, any sites that leverage 2FA, we can very easily upload the QR code to Keeper. And what that will then allow Keeper to do is to generate the 2FA code for that site login for you as well. So again, removing the manual process that users previously had to go through to leverage 2FA. All these logins can then be very easily auto-filled from the Keeper browser extension that we have right there called Keeper Fill. Secondly, how we can utilize Keeper to securely share information across the organization. So we have three approaches for taking this. First of all, if we look at an individual record right here, what we can actually do is we can share it out to somebody or multiple users by typing in the email address of those users in Keeper. Here's what level of access they have to the record, and that record information will now appear inside their vault. To revoke access, we can just delete it from the user's vault at any stage, just by following that step there. We also have the ability to create a direct URL to a record, so that even if somebody doesn't have a Keeper account, or if I just want a secure way to share information across to somebody, I no longer have to do so in plain text. And then lastly, Keeper also provides shared folders, which allow us to share a whole bunch of records out in one go to different users or teams, and these team structures can be created manually, or else they can be imported directly from your AD groups that you would have. Lastly here, how Keeper can notify you of any breach passwords that you may have in use. So we actually have a feature in here called Breach Watch. And how this works here is that Keeper has access to its own dark web database that we built and we maintain it. It contains anywhere from 5 to 10 billion passwords inside, all one passwords that have been used in data breaches in the past. And basically what we do, because we're zero knowledge, we can't see your data. So we compare a hashed version of your passwords to a hashed version of that database with the same algorithms. Once we see a match, we flag it in here, and it's a nice proactive way we can identify any breach passwords in use. So that is essentially it in terms of the password management piece. I'm just going to cut back in here to the presentation and just go to the next section, which is Secrets Manager. So Keeper Secrets Manager, or KSM for short, is a fully managed platform where you can secure your different infrastructure secrets. So with KSM, what we can do is we can remove any hard-coded credentials from your source code or from your config files, instead being able to replace them with environment variables and pulling in the secrets directly from your Keeper vault. And we do this through three different methods. First of all, we have native integrations with a wide array of different CI/CD platforms and different orchestration tools. Secondly, we have different SDKs like Python, JavaScript. And thirdly, we also then have a CLI form of the Secrets Manager, so you can use variable values for any of your locally running scripts that you may have as well. More recently, Keeper Secrets Manager also allows you to automatically rotate passwords. This can be done across your different devices like your Windows, Linux, Mac, databases, AD users, cloud-based services, and rotations can be either carried out ad hoc or on a scheduled basis. So again, just to pop very quickly into the tool here and just to demonstrate two of the main areas of this solution. So first of all, how we can actually leverage secrets inside your Keeper Vault within a development environment. And again, we're going to go back to the Keeper Vault to do this. So first of all, there's three core components to Keeper Secrets Manager working. First of all, a shared folder. And a shared folder here will be essential to store in your secrets that you have, like your API keys, your database passwords, server credentials. Secondly, an important factor is that each record in Keeper is attributed to a record UID. And that record UID is what we would use inside the development platforms themselves to pull in variable values for those specific secrets. And the third piece here would be your Secrets Manager application. So this is one that I just created yesterday just for the purpose of this call here. I pointed it down to that specific shared folder. If I wanted to add in a new device, so I'm just going to call this one here my new, for example here, my new GitLab device here, okay? And I'm going to generate out a config file here, which will be a base64 encoded string. It's going to look something like this. And that string now acts as a bridge between this specific shared folder in my Keeper Vault and the development tool that I want to use. And as we discussed, we have three main ways of leveraging those: native integrations, our SDKs, and the CLI form there as well. And just to show you a quick example of how that would look, if I wanted a secure way to leverage this Windows Server username and password, I will just make note of the record UID, fields I want to extract, and if we go into, like, say, GitHub here, for example, I can then add this piece here into any actions that I'm running, record UID followed by the field and the variable value. So going forward, any time that I want to use that Windows Server credential inside GitHub, I no longer have to use that username or password in plain text. And then secondly, in terms of password rotations, how they work through Keeper as well. Again, this would also be leveraging through Keeper Secrets Manager. We would create an application. Inside that application itself, we would deploy a Keeper gateway. The gateway is designed to perform the actual rotations itself, and it will be deployed inside your environment. And the main purpose of the gateway is that it can communicate with the machines that need to have the password changed. So inside Keeper, we can now create records for devices that I want to change the password for. So for example, a very common one there would be your Active Directory users. All that is required for this rotation to work is the credential here to the AD server itself that can perform the rotations, as well as the PAM user record, so the record of the user account I want to change the password for. And then at any point, what I can do inside Keeper is I can schedule this password change to take place daily, weekly, monthly. I can choose the complexity of the password here, or else I can just run that password rotation on demand by clicking the Rotate Now button. So again, just to go back into the slide here now, and what I'd like to talk about here is the final component, which is Keeper Connection Manager. And this is our remote desktop gateway, and basically it's designed with the goal of simplifying how a user connects to any virtualized environment, while at the same time being able to improve visibility and the machine management for the administrators. So it's a fully agentless solution in that a user just connects to the Keeper Connection Manager via the web browser. Nothing needs to be installed on the targets themselves. We just leverage the native technologies that are already used to connect to these machines, such as your SSH, RDP, and different database protocols and Kubernetes as well. So what this means first off for the end user is that they have a single pane of glass to access all machines without any VPN connectivity required, and that you as an administrator then have full visibility over all sessions taking place, both in real time and historically, and also you have the ability to assign and revoke user access to these machines as required, while never sharing credentials to the users themselves. So again, for a quick demonstration of this platform here, what I'd like to cover is basically the flow for an end user and how they would leverage the connection manager. And then secondly, how an administrator can use the solution to audit different connections taking place. So I'm just going to pull across this solution right here, first of all. Now, when a user signs into the Keeper Connection Manager, they can do so via username password. We also support AD authentication, authentication through your IDP, like your Azure AD, Okta. What they will see, first of all, is exactly on the screen here, the most recently used connections, as well as a full list of connections they have been assigned by an administrator. Now, no credentials have to be shared with the user when we're giving them access to these credentials, or to these machines, sorry. So that means we have a very, very easy means to give short-term access to these machines without any password information being shared across. In terms of opening the connections themselves, I can open up this Windows server here very quickly. And basically what this will give us from here is just full access to that server, the exact same way as we would have from any remote desktop client that there is out there. Users have the ability to copy information back and forth from the clipboard. We have the ability to create mapped drives. We can see that here, for example, at the download folder here, download folder there. So we can very easily drag and drop files from our local to our virtualized environments. And also to create a sharing profile. So if I wanted to give somebody access to this machine and they didn't have an account inside the Keeper Connection Manager, I could just generate this link for them here directly. Now for the administrative side. Admin gets real-time visibility into all active sessions taking place, like the one that we're in right here. They can join that session where they can commit actions, also quite good from a collaboration standpoint. And also they have the ability to terminate any sessions and end the session whenever that needs to be done for the user. And again, because it's not feasible to be around 24/7 watching these different sessions take place, you also have the history view, which gives us a cumulative overview into every session taking place. So the user, when they started the session, the duration, the machine they connected to, and also down here, a video recording of each session. So this is the session that we were literally in one moment ago. We can watch a recording of this. We can see here that anything that's kind of raised up here is a key event that took place during the session. And we also then have a keystroke log to give us full activity and full visibility across any text that was typed during the sessions themselves. Lastly, users then have the ability to administrate access to these different connections from the user tab, and they can essentially do this very easily by clicking into a user like Dave here, for example, and choosing when they can access the platform in terms of dates and times, permissions they have inside the platform, and machines they have or haven't got access to. These access and permission levels can also be grouped down to your AD groups, for example. And in terms of the connections that we support, if we click into this one here, for example, you can just very quickly see the different protocols that we cover. So your HTTP applications, RDP, SSH, and different databases. So it's quite comprehensive and all the main ones that you would expect to see. And again, just to go back to the presentation here one last time. So just to finish up, there we have it really. So just to very quickly summarize on what we've discussed here today, okay? So first of all, Keeper's next generation PAM platform, what it provides is the core components of a PAM solution without that added complexity, and also a very easy way of allowing your IT teams to very quickly and inexpensively deploy those different solutions. As we saw from the demonstration, it does all this by providing a single pane of glass where users can manage all their passwords, secrets, and connections, and administrators will also then have full visibility over the organization's authentication hygiene. And that is essentially it from my side. Just to say here very quickly as well, if you attend a demonstration of Keeper, we're also providing you with a free 3-year personal password manager subscription. And I think I can see a couple of questions coming in there, Keith, if you want me to hand it back over to you.
Yeah, great stuff, Tom. Thanks so much for that overview. Really important topic, obviously. Not much more important these days, is there, than this kind of stuff. We do have some questions coming in, and we do have time to get to a few of them today. So let's dive in. First question up from our attendees. Are browser-based password managers safe, and are they good enough?
So I would be inclined to say no to this. And the reason I would say no is that any password manager using for your browser, passwords will be stored in plain text, whereas Keeper is a fully zero-knowledge solution. That means your passwords will be all fully encrypted, so nothing is stored in plain text, whereas with the browser it will be. Secondly, a web browser, while it's going to secure the passwords, albeit in plain text, it's not going to give you any secure method of sharing the password. So we saw there the 3 different sharing methods that Keeper provides. Again, the passwords will only be available from the specific web browser that you're using. So if it's Chrome, for example, I can log into Chrome from anywhere, but it has to be a Chrome browser. It's not any specific device or browser that I go to. And I suppose lastly as well, Keeper can store anything. You know, a web browser is literally just limited to storing passwords, whereas Keeper is files, PI information, server certs, whatever it is that you have.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Next up, single sign-on, SSO. What are the security risks with using that?
So there's a few different points to that, right? So first of all, SSO providers are very good, like your Azure AD and your Okta. And the main pain points I would find with those, right, is first of all, single sign-on is going to be a single point of failure. So if it's not implemented properly, once a malicious user gains access to your IDP login, they automatically gain access to all the different systems. And I know you can kind of say on the other hand, well, isn't that the same principle with Keeper? But it's really not, because all the data is encrypted, and the only way to decrypt it is with the physical key on your actual machine. So an IDP, if you get the username and password, you're in. Keeper, if you get the username and password, you're not in, because you need to have the key. So eliminates that single point of failure. Secondly, as well, I'd always say that an organization is doing very well if they are able to get all their sites to be supported across single sign-on. So it's going to be anywhere between 50 and 70% of the sites will be supported through a single sign-on. And what do you do with the remaining percentage that are left over? You've got no visibility of the passwords being used, and you're essentially in the same boat as you are without any solution in place at that point.
Ouch. Okay, I think we have time for one more question today, Tom, and it's a technical one. So, of course, it's one that I enjoy. Can Keeper PAM, the product that you did mention in your overview, can that be used to update Windows service accounts? And what they mean is when the password is rotated in Active Directory, does it go to the machine? Does it go to the machine the service is running on and update it there as well?
Will do, yeah. So one of the components that we have with the Keeper Password Manager and the password rotation module that we discussed is that along with scheduling the rotation, so we saw during the demonstration how you could schedule a password rotation to take place, daily, weekly, monthly, and what you can also attach to that configuration is something that we would call a PAM script. So after the password rotation has been executed successfully and completed, that PAM script will then be ran from the credential that was provided, perform any actions that you require. And the ones you outlined there will be very typical. So things like restarting your different Windows services, and if a password's been changed, making sure that new password gets down to the different Windows services that require it. So yeah, that would be a very common use case that our customers would do with the password rotation module after a password's been updated.
All right, fantastic. Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for updating us on what Keeper Security is doing and on the necessity of managing this highly complex field in a way that looks really simple and easy to use and highly secure. So thank you once more for being on with us today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
I enjoyed that Q&A so much with Tom, and I appreciate his insights into Keeper Security. And it's time for our next poll question, which is up now. Tell us what additional resources you'd like to see from Keeper. I also want to remind everyone about the handouts. Keeper has a brief available on privileged access management, so make sure to get that while you can. Thanks to everyone who's responding to the poll. We really appreciate your feedback on that. So I'm going to keep that up here just another second to allow you to vote for just a little bit longer before we move on to the penultimate presentation of our event today. And this one is from Lacework. And we've got Tim Chase, the field SEO, queued up and ready to go. So thank you for joining us today, Tim. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. The mic is now yours.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. I want to talk for a little bit about Gen AI. It is the topic that everybody seems to be talking about and trying to figure out. And from a security perspective, I feel like we're trying to decide how to use it, where it should be used, and what are the security implications of using it. So I'd like to talk for just the next few minutes on some different ways that cybersecurity leaders can leverage AI in the upcoming year. From a bit of background, my name is Tim Chase. I run our field CTO team here at Lacework. My background is actually both as a security leader and a CISO and as a practitioner. So I spent many years doing application security testing and cloud security testing, along with running and building security teams. So I get both sides of the problems that we're seeing in the cybersecurity workforce today. And so let's just talk through Gen AI, some of the problems that we're having in the security industry today, and ultimately maybe how we can leverage this technology to help us. So it's interesting. One of the problems that we're trying to solve for, no matter what we're doing in cybersecurity, ultimately we're trying to secure the data. Everything that we do is making sure that the business stays secure and that our data stays secure. That's typically the ultimate goal of anything that we do. And in 2023, the global average cost of a data breach reached $4.45 million. That's a lot of money when you take everything into effect. There's obviously the issue of the if you have to pay any sort of ransom to the criminals. There's any sort of privacy and data fines that you have to pay. The loss of goodwill. Did you lose any of your customers? Right. There's a lot of different data points that adds up. But $4.45 million average cost is just exponential. So that's one of the major problems that we're seeing in the cybersecurity field today. And that's not getting any better. That's increased every year that I've been tracking this. And it's only going to continue to get more and more onerous, and the amount is going to get larger as more data gets put out there and as more incidents start to pile up and happen, right? And so that is one of the key problems that we have to deal with in security is how do we do everything that we can in our power not to have a data breach? And another issue that we're having to deal with in the security industry is kind of the skill shortage in cybersecurity. I've been leading teams for a while, and I can tell you that when I first got into cybersecurity, it wasn't too difficult to find staff, to be honest, right? If maybe you couldn't find somebody who had done application security before, but you could find someone who was 80% there and get them, 20% of the way. Finding network security people really wasn't as big of a deal. But over time, as technology like cloud have really kind of taken off, and it feels like every company is either in the cloud, going through a cloud migration, or going to go to the cloud. As we start to put more and more data out there and security takes even more of a prevalence in society, the gap only continues to grow. And I don't see this lessening in the next year or two either. You can see there's always more data breaches in the news. There's more onus on the boards to take an interest in cybersecurity. So if they take an interest in cybersecurity, and then they take the statistic that we just talked about related to the average cost of a data breach, you take both of those things together, and that should create opportunities within the cyber teams to grow. And so I think that the cybersecurity professional shortage is probably going to continue to grow. So you can see that 39% of security professionals claim that the skills shortage has led to an inability to learn or use security technologies to their full potential. I look at that and I see, they're too, to me, it means they're too in the weeds doing things that aren't a value add. They're looking through data, trying to find correlation points to look for threats. They're looking through the posture of their environment, trying to understand what their security posture is. They're doing things that don't necessarily add up to them being at the full potential of their job, right? And so it's taken away from them providing more value to the business, and it's taken away from them being able to learn and learn about new technologies, learn about new features, and really kind of take their cybersecurity career to the next path. And so with both of those two problems, I think there are some ways that we can look to leverage Gen AI going into next year. And just as some data points that we have already, there are some organizations that are using AI and automation together to solve some of these problems. And so when you look at where we are already, companies that experience a data breach, their resolution lifecycle was about 108 days shorter than one who did not. And that is significant for a number of reasons. It's significant because the quicker that you can close a data breach, the less likely that it's going to spread, right? The sooner that you can figure out what's going on with a data breach, the hopefully the less data that will actually be stolen, right? And so the quicker that you can find out about, stop, and fix any sort of a data breach, that's just money, right? That is time. And so those are kind of quantitative measures that you can use from a business perspective that the board can understand. And then on average, they saw nearly $1.8 million in lower data breach costs, right? If you fix something sooner and you fix it quicker, just like with anything else in the development lifecycle, it's going to save you time and it's going to save you money. And so when you look at both of those statistics, it's really worth diving into how we can use Gen AI going forward to inside of our cybersecurity program. And the first one that I would suggest is to augment your team, right? So we talked about the cybersecurity shortage to some extent. So we need to find ways to fix that. A lot of when I talk with security professionals and analysts or CISOs who run a SOC team, they spend a lot of their time maybe doing things that aren't value add, right? There are people who comb through alerts that come into the SIM and they're false positives. Well, that's when they're having to sort through tens or hundreds of alerts per day. That's not value add. That's not value add for an internal SOC team. It's not value add for an external SOC team that you're ultimately having to pay for. So we need to find ways to use Gen AI to augment our team. And I think that's really the strongest use case. And we're starting to see that go this way. A lot of the major MDR providers that are out there are using Gen AI, or at least they will start to next year to do some of this. They'll be able to capture data from alerts that are coming in and figure out ways to decrease those alerts or take some of those mundane tasks away. And it really, you can look at it from both sides. You can look at it from people internal in some of the tasks that you do, maybe automating some of the GRC tasks or automating some of your SOC alerts, like anything along those lines are ways that you can augment your team. And that, it's not just a cool thing to do, but it actually will help the job satisfaction of the employees that you have. Because I feel like that a lot of security professionals are reaching this burnout stage, right? So they'll job hop, or maybe they turn to doing virtual CISOs or something like that, because they're tired of doing this mundane stuff. They're tired of looking through the alerts. So by automating away some of this stuff, you will help increase the job satisfaction of the employees that you do have. And then it will allow you to really expand your team and make use of the resources that you have. So maybe instead of hiring, 5 more analysts, maybe you can get away with hiring 2 because you have some Gen AI handling some of the things that the lower level analysts would have handled. The second way is anomaly detection. So this goes a little bit with what we talked about prior, right? So when we're coming through alerts, right? If everybody who's worked, we'll just use a SIM as an example because it's an easy target, right? When we're coming through alerts in a SIM, a lot of times they are rule-based alerts. If this happens, then fire. If this happens, then fire, right? And that has been effective in the past. That's why WAFs were built that way in security technology. But when you look at the cloud and you look at the sheer amount of data and the sheer amount of transactions and network volume that happens these days, things that are rule-based tend to be they tend to be troublesome, right? And they're difficult to manage because you burn a lot of cycles when an alert comes in, reading through the alert, maybe looking through some other logs, figuring out if it's a false positive. And a lot of them are going to be, right? With pure rules-based systems, they can be 80 or 90% false positives. And that is just time that is not well spent. So where machine learning has in the past, with Lacework and will in the future, I think coming up, is anomaly detection using Gen AI is going to be very helpful because you can use the learning that you have to understand what is normal in an environment and then take action based on that. So when you think about each environment is different, right? Not every environment is the same. And so Gen AI can be used to kind of establish a pattern inside of a specific person's environment, inside a specific cloud environment. And then when something deviates from that, then it can surface up in alert. It's not going to be totally dependent on the rules. It's going to be based on what it sees in the history, what it sees in the logs, and then surface up only the things that it sees as an anomaly based on the predictable patterns and based on what it has seen, from what kind of known TTPs out in the wild, right? And so that's where Gen AI can be really helpful. Is it's smart enough to be able to pick up those patterns, and it's quicker than the human brain would be by combing through all of the alerts. And so that's kind of a second way that we can use to help. And that, like I said, for number one and number two kind of go together. If you can use anomaly detection to help bring down the number of false positives, base it on what we believe to be real attacks and real things that should be reviewed, that leads back to being able to do more with less and allowing the people to be happier because what they're reviewing are actual issues. Another one is ask questions and find insights faster. So being able to look at an alert of some type and been able to query against it. One of the best ways to solve for the cybersecurity shortage that I have always found is to bring in people that aren't necessarily cyber people and bring them over and teach them cyber, right? I mentioned my application security person earlier. I had a performance tester back when I used to run that as well. And he had 80% of the knowledge that he needed to do the job. He just didn't have the 20% related to security. He understood applications. He understood how apps were built. And he could break them when it came to performance. I just had to teach him how to break it when it came to security. And so Gen AI is the perfect way to be able to help this, right? So when you have these newer SOC analysts or these newer people in security, being able to use kind of an alert assistant to query on an alert is super helpful. And you can see kind of an example here where you've got a new login using call type. And someone could look at this and be like, I have no idea what this means whatsoever, right? So then you could ask, why does this alert matter? And you could see it would tell you that. And then you could say, how do I fix this alert? Can you write a script so I can fix this alert? Can you write an email to an executive that I could send to explain this alert, right? So there are a lot of different ways that you can look at this and really kind of get more information. It's a great way to avoid some of the back and forth, right? If an analyst is looking at this, they don't understand it, then they go to the cloud team to ask the cloud team, then they got to come back, right? And that always creates some sort of friction because everybody's time is limited, right? Why are you asking this? You should know this. But being able to understand this, it's a great way for people to kind of do more themselves. They can educate themselves, and it's a way to get insights into your data faster. So leveraging that machine learning so that you can get those insights as quick as possible. Number 4, so ensure privacy by design. This is kind of a note of caution, I guess I would say, in that, Gen AI and machine learning, Gen AI is awesome and LLMs are great. But, we do need to keep some things in mind as we kind of go down this route of using them and as we purchase solutions that use them, right? So, we need to make sure that we understand how the data for the Gen AI solution is used and how it's shared, right? So, and there's a couple of different ways to look at this. One is with the cloud provider itself. Obviously, the major cloud providers have their own, I guess machine learning as a service, if you will, or Gen AI as a service that can be used. Well, they have the problem of making sure that what you have does not cross the boundaries of their customers, right? When you set up kind of this own little container, this own little machine learning instance, making sure that it is just for you, because you don't want data to cross, right? You don't want to mix data, and that's one of the attack methods that is out there. And the same thing goes when you're building your own Gen AI system, right? And that to help you with your security program or to integrate into what you're building, keep this in mind because a very common attack vector. If you look at the OWASP top 10 for LLMs, one of the big attack vectors is ensuring privacy, right? Making sure you don't have that bleed over from client A into client B. And so we really need to understand how are our LLMs designed, how the Gen AI solutions defined, both where we're using them and consuming them as a service, but also when we're building our own and we're using our own, making sure that we understand what's going in there, right? What is the data source that you're feeding to your Gen AI engine? Because number one, if you feed it bad data, it's super hard to untrain or relearn a learning model, right? And to cleanse it of that data. So you got to make sure that it's clean, but you also have to make sure that you understand what's in it. If you inadvertently load data sets with confidential, proprietary, or sensitive data, those can be queried by people who may not have access. So it is a security concern. So we always have to make sure going into this, going into next year, this is going to become a bigger year, bigger thing to consider when we start using Gen AI solutions even more. And then finally, this is one I think where there's a lot of potential is recognizing patterns. What I have been intrigued by and what I've noticed over the past year or so in the industry is this concept of a data lake, the security data lake. And so that's basically, people want to store all of their security data, all their security findings in one place. Snowflake's got one, AWS has one, I think Azure has one. It's meant because everybody recognizes that having disparate data sources for their security isn't advantageous. And I think, the SIM isn't always the right place to put it. So there's this concept of a security data lake that has really emerged. The inherent problem of a security data lake is it's a lot of data. Like if you can imagine dumping all of this data from your cloud, from your SIM, from your vulnerabilities, from your AppSec, all of this stuff, it just doesn't, it becomes difficult to make sense of the data, right? Now you're writing rules, you're writing queries to get to this. And so one of the things that I believe in 2024 that we're going to use Gen AI for and that we should be pushing for and looking for solutions to do this is to recognize patterns, right? If you've got all of your data in one place, Gen AI can correlate this data for you. It can recognize patterns, maybe new ways that people are exploiting your system, maybe data exfiltration that wasn't noticed, right? So the human brain can only do so much when it comes to recognizing patterns when you're talking about terabytes and terabytes of data. But when it is a machine learning, when it's an LLM or a Gen AI engine, like they can look at all of this and they can understand this data at scale without a problem, right? And so this is going to be one of the most powerful ways that we're going to use Gen AI next year. I truly believe, because we're starting to do it a little bit now with some of the statistics that we showed at the beginning, and this is only going to grow because we've got this appetite in the security team to find things quicker and to comb through massive amounts of data quicker. And that's really where Gen AI is going to be able to really help, is by being able to recognize the patterns, alert on it, and help teams. And when you look at all of these things and you put them together, from the cybersecurity shortage, the anomaly detection, the recognizing the patterns, right? All of this I think they are going to solve some of the core problems that we see in the cybersecurity industry, right? We have some decent problems, but a lot of them just really involve around the amount of data that we consume, the amount of people that we can have. And if we can use Gen AI to solve these problems next year, which I believe we can with what I'm seeing on the market, that's just going to be a game changer for security. And ultimately, it will allow us to do it'll allow us to do more, right? Security always maps back to the business, or it should. If you're doing something in the security program that doesn't have business value, then we should talk, and I would suggest maybe putting that on hold. But all of this will enable us to do things that put down the things that are mundane, put down the things that don't add value, and figure out ways to add more value to the business. And so thank you for listening. I hope this was valuable. If you want to talk any more about this or anything else related to Lacework or just security in general, my email is tim.chase@lacework.net. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I love to talk to other cybersecurity professionals to hear your thoughts, to hear whether it's on Gen AI, what you're seeing, what you're thinking. I would love to hear from you. So thank you for the time today.
And thank you, Tim, for the great overview of generative AI and what's coming up with that and how that's going to affect security. Boy, there's that's a big topic, and there's going to be lots and lots more obviously coming out about that in the future. So I have put up the next poll question, and this has to do with telling Lacework what more information you want about their solution. I think Tim's presentation whetted a lot of appetites today, so vote in that and let them know. Now, I'm getting some reports that the Lacework handout has been a little problematic for some folks to download. If that's happening to you, please reach out to Lacework when you get a chance, and they will be happy to help you out with that and any other questions that you've got. So thanks to everyone who is responding to the poll. We appreciate your feedback. And Lacework will also respond to the questions that have come in today. And with that, everyone, we are winding down now. It is time for our final presentation in today's EcoCast, and this one comes from Zilla Security. Presenting for Zilla is Chris Pedigo, the field CTO. Now, Chris is also joining us after his presentation for some Q&A. So remember to fire off those questions as you're watching the presentation so that Chris and I can dive into some of those. Chris, it is great to have you here today. Take it away.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's great to be here. So, all right, everyone. I think I'm the last talk of the day, so bear with me. First off, I want to say I'm Chris Pedigo. I'm field CTO at a security company called Zilla Security. We do identity security. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but I'm really here more to talk about the identity and access management space. And, if you're interested, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn later. You can just find me, Chris Pedigo, and happy to chat. So let's get started. So at Zilla, we believe that identity is in the center. What do I mean by that? If I were to look out at the identity landscape, there's been two main gravitational areas for identity. And everything's really brought around by that. But what we've been seeing is 75% of breaches are caused by mismanaged identity and access. What that means is I have an old account from 2 companies ago that lies dormant, and maybe someone got those credentials. Or maybe that means that I was specifically phished with my account, and there's not enough controls or tracking in place to realize that I'm doing malicious things. The next thing that's important for why identity security matters is 79% of organizations have reported having an identity-related breach. So if you think about that, that's like everyone. Now, this is obviously public companies who are forced to disclose, but that's a pretty big deal. Now, oftentimes these breaches are very small, like Bitcoin mining in an AWS account, but the fact that it happens so often is a really, really big challenge. So looking out, kind of going back to what I just said, what that really means is identity is broken up into 2 separate areas. You've got your identity providers and identity security. Now, identity providers, this started out historically with Active Directory. So I took my MCSE training on NT4 back in 1999, and I spent an entire week just learning about users and groups and least privilege and most privilege and how all of that stuff worked. And there were people who that's their entire job. And then as we've moved forward into the cloud and to kind of the new way of doing things, we've seen a big proliferation of SSO. So if you think of like, if you've ever logged in, clicking that login with Google, or Okta is a really big company out there, and they help with a lot of this. And Microsoft's actually a big leader too, where they, manage your identity and access within their systems. And then a lot of applications just tie in to provide that access. So that's one area, establishing trust and identity. How do you log into systems? Now, not everything is tied into these central systems like Okta, so that's something to remember. Then the next thing is locking down access. Here, this is really three parts. The first one is joiners, movers, and leavers. So when I join a company, am I given all of the accounts I need to do my job? This is really important because nothing slows down productivity like having to wait 3 or 5 days to get access to the systems you need to do things. I know that I joined a company once many years ago, and it took 4 days to get email. And it's really hard to do a job in the last 30 or 40 years in technology without an email. The next thing is movers and leavers. This one's really important too, because when you start out at one role, you may need a set of permissions, but if you get promoted or change departments, do you still need the same permissions you've had? And what we found is most companies, they just keep the same set of accounts from when they start until when they leave. And so if you're doing tracking, what that means is I often have many old accounts, or as companies grow, like there's been stories of CEOs who have full admin privileges to production because, like the company was small. It made a lot of sense because they were a technical CEO, but when they're very big, they don't need it anymore. And additionally, leavers. Now, this is a critical one. This is how a lot of companies have been compromised. One big technology company that I know of had a user leave the they actually left on bad terms in the middle of this was about 5 years ago in like July. And then in November, they actually logged in with old credentials for a service account they owned, and they deleted a bunch of data. And eventually they did go to jail over this. So it was like a pretty big deal, but like the service disruption was pretty bad. And so making sure you account for people's accounts when they leave, and not just their core accounts, but the service accounts they own or the side accounts that they've created is really important. Privilege access management. This is, you really care about a certain set of accounts more than everything else. This is who could submit payroll, who can add vendors, vendors for pay, or like who owns your Active Directory or your Okta domain. And then finally, security and compliance posture. You see there's a big section for this in CSPM. So how is your AWS account configured? But these configurations go well beyond AWS. They go to how is Salesforce configured? How is Workday configured? Because these are also very important systems that could potentially be misconfigured and put you in a risky situation. So that's kind of the identity landscape. And so if we were to split things up and think about it, you could really look at the traditional focus, and I think of how we should start looking at it. So with the traditional focus, everything was compliance and lifecycle. So if you actually think back, for those of you who remember Enron, what happened here is a lot of people were, and Enron wasn't the only company, they were just the most well-known. They were reporting revenue that wasn't actually true. And it drove this whole Sarbanes-Oxley thing, which was all about compliance and checking access and systems of controls. And that really spun out kind of this new identity space that we're talking about. And it grew, but over time, we've seen that it's really not enough to just check things out once every 3 months. You really need to lead with a more continuous approach. And so looking forward, we also want to add security to that, because just because Chris has access to this account, does he have permissions he needs? Should he still have those permissions? Those are important questions to ask. Additionally, when you're looking at these big old systems, and there's some pretty big vendors in this space, like SailPoint is one of them. They're very expensive to deploy and maintain. They often take armies of consultants to deploy. And while they do a fine job, it's just really hard. They don't do a great job at connecting to kind of the new technology, the things that run business today. And so it's something that's it's pretty interesting to think about when you look at where do you need to focus for identity security. And I really believe that you need to think about something that considers who has access, should they have access, and do it in such a way that you could very quickly look up and say, okay, I believe that this person should continue having this access. So what does that bring to us? This is kind of the philosophy of Zilla and how we really think you should look at things going forward. So first, identity is in the center. This is what it means. It means that I, Chris Pedigo, am a human and I own many accounts in many different applications. Like I can log into Salesforce, I can log into AWS, I can log into Snowflake. And I have a lot of these accounts that I've created myself. Some of them I've created through access requests, like logging into Jira and saying, hey, I need access to this, and someone else provisioned them for me. And some of them were given to me just when I started the company. Well, during my time, the accounts I've had have grown, and I've had to do a lot of testing. I write some code to do something here or there. And what that does is it generates all of these accounts that start to become untracked by your traditional identity security systems. And so it's like a local account in AWS, or I created a separate Snowflake instance to store some data for a project. And these are really important things for your organization to know, because one day, if I'm no longer at the company, there's going to be all of these accounts that I created. Some may be used for production work, some may not, that are just lost. And if you think I'm just one person, if you think you multiply that by the number of people at your organization, you really have a lot of challenges if you're not continually monitoring and looking to review. And so if you look at the approach that really the future of identity is you start tracking who people are, and then you start connecting to all of the different applications that it takes for you to run your business, your Salesforces, your AWSs, your Oktas. And you take all of that information, you start mapping out who owns this account, who has access to this account, how was this access created? Was it an access request? If so, where's the ticket that shows the access and the approver? Or was it birthright? Is this what someone got when they started the company, when they started here? And then you want to start tracking things like, okay, this was birthright access, but are they still at the same role? And all of these things are part of like everyday business for the people who are responsible. And traditionally, this has been done with spreadsheets. So this is people logging in with a CSV, trying to look at understand who has access to what and build it together. So if you have a system that uses technology to log into Workday, here's all the humans in your organization. Then they log into Salesforce. All right, here's all the people with access to Salesforce, all the different Salesforce accounts. And they start mapping them together. Then you start developing an identity. And you're like, oh, this person has access to Salesforce. Here's their account. This person has access to Okta. Here's their account. And it really starts pulling together. Here's all the things this person can do. And that really helps you understand, like, oh, this person has administration privileges to my Okta account. They can actually give themselves access to all of these other things. So I need to make sure that this privileged credential is monitored super well. Because as we saw with the Okta compromise very recently, if a privileged Okta account or a privileged identity account in one of your core sources gets compromised, it allows people to build their own additional accounts and deploy them over time. It's a really scary thing. And that's one of the problems we have as we look at consolidation. And that's why we're really seeing all of these cybersecurity companies in identity, because they're trying to think, what's a new way? What's a different way? What's a better way? And we believe that they should actually be separate from your identity provider, because you can't have Okta policing itself or Active Directory policing itself, because if those get compromised, the criminals now have the ability to cover up their own actions. That's why making identity tracking and pulling it out of the applications you use whatever app you want, but just feed that data into a place that can keep you secure, that can apply rules, help you understand what's going on. So that's what, when people say identity in the center or identity security, this is really what they mean. It's a central repository for all of the people, all of the service accounts, all of the third parties who have access to systems in your, organization, and what they can do with those. So that leads us to kind of like the overview of your approach. So starting out, a holistic approach where you think about security first. This is least privilege, proactive controls, and threat detection. What this helps you do is say, okay, I know I have more misconfigurations, more terminated users with access, more things that I know what to deal with. So what I do with security is I take everything that I have and I start sorting it by risk. For example, a user in HubSpot is a lot less important to remediate than an admin in Okta. So if you have 10 minutes to fix one thing, you need a security product and identity that helps you say, go fix the admin in Okta first, and then you could get to this next thing later and this next thing later. And so what at Zilla we do is we take that and we apply that to all of the things that are most important. And we only bubble up the information that matters most to you. So if an alert comes to Zilla from the security module, you can guarantee that if it's critical, it means, okay, it's a Saturday morning at 3 a.m. and I get this critical alert. I'm going to be able to glance in it and very quickly know, oh man, Zilla told me there's this account that's very at risk because it's an admin, it doesn't have MFA, and it's tied to a user who's no longer at the company. I need to turn that off now. Or you can see it and you're like, oh, this is a medium, I'm going to go back to sleep, I'll get to that on Monday. And having that understanding and having a vendor and a partner that really understands that and helps you is really the way to go from an identity security perspective, because you don't want 1,000 events with no way to figure out what to do with them. Next up, compliance. This one's really interesting because user access reviews are traditionally done quarterly, but you could really do them every day if you have a system that manages it automatically. So with compliance, you have user access reviews, separation of duties, and then you'll have your auditors who do come in, quarterly or yearly, and you need to gather evidence for them. So having a platform that puts all of that together is really crucial to operationalizing your business and to make securing identity the least stressful thing possible. Finally, provisioning. So how do people get access? How do you make sure that people's access is appropriate for their job role? And are they still in the role that they requested that access for? And are they using those accounts? How do you manage that? And for example, when I join a company, I shouldn't have to request access to Salesforce. How do I manage that that is built into the users and identities? So having a strong provisioning story is also important. And now, what is a company talking about anything that doesn't involve AI? I mean, it's really the hottest thing to talk about right now. So adding it into your journey is important. I wouldn't say there are any vendors who are great at this yet, so don't make it a decision criteria. Just think of it as a nice to have. But you want something that takes all of these things we were talking about, identity security, identity compliance, and identity provisioning, and wraps around an AI to help you with a couple things. For example, Active Directory, you could have hundreds or thousands of individual permissions and groups. We have some companies who have tens of thousands of groups in their Active Directory. And so this is a great place where, for example, an LLM could review all of the permissions and what they're assigned to and start giving you a much more streamlined version of what's there. Or the other thing is, if an alert is triggered, for example, we see that a job title changes, that could feed into the AI and it can understand that, hey, when this job title changes, we've seen in the last 8 people for this to happen, they stopped logging into this specific application and they started logging into that application. And so what can happen is it can start triggering automated workflow to track what it is that people are doing and where it is they're spending their time. And as job titles change, what are they doing in the new job that they weren't doing in the old job? So you can automatically suggest tickets for the new role and suggest removing permissions from the old role. And so pulling this all together, what it really gives you is a fast time to value. And like I mentioned earlier, some of the incumbents in this space, they really take a lot of effort to deploy. And so if you were to, say, purchase one of them, you look at your first access review is going to take 6 months. And by the time you get all of your applications onboarded, you've probably turned off 20% of them and added new ones. And so it's like something where going from 0 to I can do an access review, 0 to I can do a security review, or 0 to I can add new users. I could submit access requests to get permissions in a timely manner is very important. And finally, and this is something that I don't believe enough companies focus on, is your user experience. So especially with access reviews, the people who are logging in to do these reviews are often not that technical. Access reviews are broken up into many different areas, but often you'll see it as supervisor reviews. That would mean I review everyone's permissions for everyone on my team, or account-based reviews, like I'm just going to review all of these applications and all of the accounts in all of these applications because they're in scope for my SOC audit. But what you'll find is often these applications business owners are non-technical people. Like your head of sales probably owns Salesforce, and they're probably not the most technical person. So going in and using a complicated system to figure out if they're going to maintain or revoke permissions drives really bad behavior. And we've seen this with customer stories as they've implemented our product, where previously they're like, yeah, this person would never do their reviews. They would just automatically maintain all permissions every time, or they'd never get in and update the information. And so having a system that's very easy for non-technical people to log in and use is a huge part of technology today. It's not enough to save you time. It's not enough to save you money or to help you focus on where to spend your time. You also need to make it so that when you need to do a job, it's very clear what that job is, and they need to be a good partner in helping you with that. All right. Now I will step off my soapbox and say, thank you, Keith. I really appreciated giving me some time to talk. And it does look like we have a couple questions, so let's go ahead and get to those.
Absolutely, Chris. We do indeed have questions for you today. Thank you for that incredible presentation. So much good stuff there. While we go through those, I now have put up the last poll question of the day. So tell us what additional resources you would like to see from Zilla while Chris and I get to your great questions. Chris, you ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready to go. How's it going, everyone?
They are curious is how they're doing right now, because you have whet their appetites for what Zilla is doing. So first question up today, Chris. Some identity provider vendors now claim to provide identity governance and security. How are those solutions different from the pure play identity security solutions? That's an interesting one.
Yeah, there's some interesting thoughts here, and it depends on how tinfoil security hat you are on this one. You've got companies out there like Okta who are starting to try and move into identity security, and they've previously been about access and authorization. And it's good that they are, but the problem is the product that is giving you access, if that product gets compromised, that also compromises the security of that product. So when you're looking at all of the pure play vendors, what they're doing is they're policing the tools you use to manage your organization. And if you're looking at the vendors who are kind of splitting, one, they're not necessarily incentivized to highlight all their challenges because they want to look like a great product. And two, their focus is, providing you Okta tiles so you can log into all your applications more than it is making sure that all your applications and permissions are tied together. They also have a lot of market factors pushing, like where they're spending and splitting their time. So all of the pure play vendors, Zilla included, spend more time making sure that whatever your unique solution to your business and identity is secure, whatever mix that is. Maybe you're using Okta for your web apps, but you have some homegrown apps and you have a couple apps that aren't SSO capable. Being able to protect everything is really important, and that's what the pure play vendors really help with.
Gotcha. Okay, great answer. Now we've got one that really is business focused and is quite interesting. So here it is for you, Chris. You mentioned security posture around identity and access. Is there a way I can make sure that the service accounts I have across all my applications and infrastructure match up with business requirements and aren't just sitting around for no reason waiting to become account takeover targets?
This is interesting. One of the actual things that I find most often, even back in my CSPM days and now, is anytime you look at all of the accounts within the application, the SaaS apps and non-SaaS apps that an organization owns, you'll find many accounts that nobody knows who own them. Nobody knows what to do with them. And these are often service accounts, or sometimes they're just accounts that someone in IT or someone in tech, or very often sales engineers or things like that, had created to solve a quick problem or to do a demo, and they just sit and live there. One of the approaches that we found is most appropriate, and some companies really try to do this, is you assign owners, like real humans, as owners to all of the service accounts. And this is a little bit of a hard challenge if you don't have processes in place to do it, because it can be daunting. Some of our customers, for example, have over 400 AWS accounts. And so being able to figure out across those 400 accounts who owns what is pretty challenging. So this is actually where tools like Zilla really shine, because we give you some rules so you can automatically apply owners to, say, the business owner or the technical owner of any individual app you have integrated with us. Or you can put in rules to say, if it's privileged, it's owned by this person. If it's not privileged, it's owned by this person. So if you look out over your kind of accounts, you'll be able to track and manage everything tied to humans. And then we have workflows in case, say, you have a joiner, mover, leaver, to track them. So if someone gets a new job, it automatically triggers, like even within the company, it triggers a workflow that says, hey, these service accounts really, are they still owned by this person who now has a new title? The answer is yes. You can go about your day. If the answer is no, it lets you reassign them to the new person who's responsible. And this is especially important for leavers, because often if I've left the company, I actually still have credentials for all of the accounts I created. Whether or not, if I created them on my work laptop, I probably won't have accidentally had a copy, but there are some ways where someone might accidentally have credentials over time, and it's really just a trust chain that you want to be careful with.
Right. That is so important. I mean, companies often are just shocked at how many sort of passive, inactive accounts they have just lying around once they do a good audit of them. And all of those are potential vulnerabilities just waiting for someone, to swoop in and take advantage of them. So that is great to hear. Okay. I think we've got time for one more here before we let you go today, Chris. Final question for you today is, are you able to integrate with my key apps such as Twilio, Jenkins, Concur, and Adobe? Now, obviously, those are just examples, and our attendees have got lots more. And if you can integrate with those, how long does it typically take?
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty interesting question. Zilla integrates with applications in three ways. One, if they have APIs, it's super simple. But as you well know, there's a lot of custom-built apps that don't have APIs, or sometimes APIs cost extra, or it's just needlessly complicated. So we can integrate with any app. We have if you can view the users on a Chrome web browser, we have the ability to pull in those users and start mapping them to pull in those accounts and start mapping them to the users. It's a really, really cool tool. And it's super simple. So what we found is, while it's in the IGA space, usually you're taking weeks or months to deploy apps. Our customers generally in a 2-week trial period deploy around 40 or integrate with like 40 different apps. So if you think about that, it's kind of night and day compared to anyone else. Super easy to do, very low tech, very low effort. So you don't have to have a PhD in all of these cloud applications to get them working.
Sure. And it's always wise to reach out to a prospective vendor and just, ask that kind of a question as well. So, okay. And final thing here today, Chris, if someone wants to take the next step with Zilla, I'm sure you have generated a lot of interest with this presentation. What would you recommend they do right after the event ends today? What should they do next?
I think they should go to zillasecurity.com and fill out a form. We'd love to talk to you or demo. You could also connect with me on LinkedIn or any of my peers on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to talk to you. If you're a medium-sized company and you do access reviews regularly, there is no better product on the market. I can say that very confidently. We have a lower time to value and a much better approach.
Great. And again, Zilla cannot wait to hear from you. Thank you so much for your Q&A insights today, Chris. It is great to see so much interest in what Zilla Security is doing. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd also like to remind everyone one last time about the handouts. Zilla has a downloadable PDF on identifying the weaknesses in your security posture. Now, does that sound useful? Yeah, I thought so. So be sure to check that out in the few remaining minutes we have left. Thanks to everybody who's responded to the poll. We appreciate your feedback. And with that, we are going to move on to the final prize drawing of today's EcoCast. We've got one more to give away, and as Jess mentioned right up top, you do have to stick around for the entire event, for any Actual Tech Media event, to be eligible to win these prizes. And the winner of the final $300 Amazon gift card for this event is Steve Hyde from Wisconsin. Congratulations to you, Steve. Sit tight and you will be hearing from us. Well, that's it for the presentations, everyone. You made it through a long but hopefully productive event. And if you are watching the event today and thinking that this could work for you, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you to help you determine which of our hundreds of events each year would be a good fit for you, or that includes custom events. We make them for vendors all the time that are specifically focused on your product or offering. Contact us at the email address you see up there, connect@actualtechmedia.com. And speaking of security, the topic of today's event, we have got another one coming up on Friday that you are going to be super interested in, I think. It's a ransomware special, Ransomware 2024, applying 2023's lessons to reduce risk. Ransomware is showing no signs of slowing in the new year. If anything, it is picking up, as it always seems to be doing. So I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's happening Friday, January 26th at noon Eastern, which is, of course, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Please sign up for that if it looks good, and get ready for another great event. Sign up, in fact, as soon as this event is over, which is almost right now. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations, demos, and Q&A insights today. I want to give our sponsors a final shout out, and they include Okta and Nudge, CyberArk, Rubrik, Keeper, Lacework, and Zilla. It has been a total blast of an event today. Thanks to all of you attendees for being here. I am honored that you joined me for it today. And that concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day, folks, and please stay warm.